May I have your attention, please? I have been notified that we do have a quorum, so if we could be seated, we may let all the fun begin once again. Dawn, Mrs. Rand, could you bang the gavel twice and I can declare that we are back in session? Okay. Okay, town meeting is back in session. If you recall, in our last episode, we actually completed Article 28, so we will, in this episode, begin with Article 29. Selectman Pantazis.
Me? Okay. I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $110,000 for expenditures by the Northborough Department of Public Works Highway Division for the purpose of replacing the Otis Street crossing over the Smith Pond outlet, and to meet said appropriations, the sum of $110,000 be transferred from free cash.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Could we turn the music down in the background, please? Thank you. Presentation by DPW Director Dan Nassen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I was prepared to start at Article 5. That's not right. Thank you. As the moderator said, we're starting off at Article number 29, the Otis Street Culvert. Very similar, if many of you recall, to last night's last presentation, Article 28, which was the Church Street Culvert replacement. This is very similar. This request is to fund the design of the Otis Street Culvert, or crossing, again, because it doesn't quantify as a bridge, over the outlet from Smith Pond. Otis Street serves as a critical link between Route 20 to the north and Route 9 to the south. During the recent construction of the sewer main in Otis Street, which was part of the Walmart expansion project, and they installed the sewer pump station down by this crossing, we had the opportunity to visually inspect the structure and found that the metal substructure is in extremely poor condition. So this structure will need to be replaced, and that's what this funding will provide us for the design.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion from the floor, please, on Article 29? Yes.
Okay. Doug Stone, 33 Birch Hill Road. I just wondered, are they going to widen this bridge?
Through the moderator?
Yes.
We will be looking at that. However, we'll be confined with whatever restraints we may have with the abutments and costs associated with the expansion of the abutments, as well as there's utilities there. There's a water main that comes above grade. There's a gas force main there, so we'll have to look at that when the time comes. But, you know, Otis Street is a road that was never designed for the purpose of what it's used for now. It's definitely a major cut through. There's a lot of industry and commercial property there, so it's just not that type of a road for what it serves now. But we will look at, see however we can improve it. We will try to do so. But we'll also be limited by the right-of-way there.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on Article 29? Hearing none, may I have the recommendations from the Appropriations Committee, please?
Not in song, Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you.
The Appropriations Committee recommends approval of this article.
And may I hear from the Financial Planning Committee, please?
Mr. Moderator, Financial Planning also recommends approval.
Thank you. This is what you're voting on for Article 29. I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $110,000 for expenditure by the Northborough Department of Public Works Highway Division for the purpose of replacing the Otis Street crossing over the Smith Pond outlet, and to meet said appropriation, the sum of $110,000 be transferred from free cash. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Those opposed? Article 29 passes. Article 30. Mr. Pantazis.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $150,000 for expenditures by the Northborough Department of Public Works Sewer Division to pay cost of designing improvements to the Hudson Street Pump Station, and to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 7(1) of the general laws, or any other enabling authority, and with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore.
Yeah.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Our DPW Director, Mr. Nassen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 30, the Hudson Street Sewer Pump Station. This request is to fund the design for necessary improvements to the Hudson Street Sewer Pump Station. This station pumps the majority, and I say the majority, of the municipality, with the exception of 4 separate facilities located on Bartlett Street, Cedar Hill, and the high school, where you are tonight. Of the town's sewer, it sends it to the Marlboro Westerly Treatment Plant. This station dates back to 1977. Therefore, it's 37 years old and is in need of new energy-efficient pumps, gas monitoring and ejection system, controls, upgrades to the controls, and replacement of the existing emergency generator that's there on site now.
Thank you. Questions and discussions on Article 30 from the floor, please. And not hearing any or seeing any, I ask for the recommendations from the Appropriations Committee.
This is going to come as a surprise to all of you, but the Appropriations Committee recommends approval of this article.
Knock me over with a feather. Financial Planning Committee, please.
Mr. Moderator, Financial Planning also recommends approval of this article.
Okay. This vote will require a 2/3 vote, so tellers, on your toes, be ready. Here's what we're voting on for Article 30. I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $150,000 for expenditure by the Northborough Department of Public Works, Sewer Division, to pay costs of designing improvements to the Hudson Street Pump Station. And to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 7(1) of the general laws, or any other enabling authority, and with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore. Again, this is a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Those opposed? I declare that Article 30 has passed by a 2/3 vote. Article 31. Chair Rutan.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $1,500,000 to pay costs of purchasing a water meter replacement and billing system for the Northborough Department of Public Works, Water and Sewer Divisions, and to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 8, 7A of the general laws or any other enabling authority, and with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. DPW Director, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This request is to fund the replacement of all 4,300 plus or minus meters throughout town. The existing meter system consists of multiple types of aged meters dating back 15 years, meaning that they are many different models from the same manufacturer. This causes a problem when reading the meters remotely. Today, over 3,000 of our oldest meters are in their expectant battery life. These meters are quickly becoming more and more difficult to obtain a reading. The meters proposed to be installed as part of this program are the same type of automatic meter reading, meaning AMR, automatic meter reader, which means that we can drive by and read the meters, which we're currently doing now. However, these new meters have no moving parts. They have improved accuracy and an extended battery life with an expectancy of 20 years non-prorated warranty, which means we don't have to look at these meters again for 18 or 19 plus years. The advanced technology allows for better customer service and will allow us to migrate in the future to a fixed network system. What that means is we'd be installing other remote stations throughout town, still using the same automatic meter reading technology with the RF frequencies and reading them remotely. No longer driving through and having to read the meters in that way. This will enable us to improve efficiencies by eliminating manual reads and final reads. That'll equate to a cost savings over $20,000 year over year. These meters are also manufactured with a stainless steel base, not being brass like the current ones. And this helps us comply with the state's no lead law. The existing meter transmitter batteries are failing due to age. Meters are the foundation of the enterprise funds. Meters record usage. Usage is billed for money, and monies are collected for the water used. It's that simple. The revenue is what keeps the enterprise funds operational and sustaining. In the past 2 years here as Director of the Public Works Department, I have had the opportunity to critically evaluate many aspects of all the divisions of the department. A great deal of time and effort was taken by many professionals, including myself, the financial team, and various engineering consultants to identify areas where improvements and upgrades are needed. It is my professional opinion that in order to maintain the sustainability of the water and sewer enterprise funds, we have to replace these meters. As it is, we have 3,000 out of the 4,300 that are currently dying. The battery life is ending. Early on, I identified this project as a priority. It was included in the Water Master Plan, the rate study, and the Capital Improvement Plan. Automatic meter reader technology is exactly what has been used in the past decade and a half here in Northborough. It's nothing new to the town or the industry, and these new meters provide substantial additional benefit over the old meters. Provides a uniform system encompassing 1 meter and 1 reading device, no longer having multiple hand readers and multiple devices out there, which allows us to eliminate the potential for errors in billing. They have a 20-year non-prorated warranty, as I mentioned. They have the ability to migrate to the fixed network, and it enhanced customer service, which gives, the only example I can think of is in the community where I live. I filled up my pool that we had installed at my residence, and I did it over a weekend. The following Monday, my water department contacted our home and told us that we went through 20-something gallons of water. It was nice to know that they could actually find that, and it triggered them to contact me, because otherwise I would have been responsible for that water usage. But I was able to tell them that, yes, I do in fact have a pool. I just filled it up, so thank you for the call. So we're looking to save the customers, the consumers out there. We bill here internally in the town in 3-month cycles. So if you have a small water leak, even if it's from a toilet, that can accumulate to a $1,000 bill within 3 months or over. So if you don't realize you have a leak, you could potentially end up with a $1,000 bill. And that's what we're trying to prevent. So we can actually set parameters on these meters, which are red flags. If you go over a certain amount of usage, we can actually have the ability to somehow contact you and let you know, so that it doesn't continue and you're not responsible for the additional water use.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on Article 31 from the floor, please? Right over here.
As I look at my water bill, I see that for every dollar spent, I am paying approximately 40 cents to bring water in and 60 cents to remove it through the sewer system. But I put a lot of water on my garden. In other towns, you are able to rent a meter from the town for summer use for watering your garden and other outdoor places, and then at the end of the season, an adjustment can be made of removing the sewer charge for that amount of water. The town does not pay for the water going to Marlborough based upon the gallonage pumped. It pays for the gallonage that actually arrives in Marlborough. And therefore, I think I should have an opportunity to properly pay for the water I use, but not pay for the sewerage that I do not use.
Yes.
Mr. Moderator, if I can respond to that. I understand your concern. We can definitely take that up with the Water Sewer Commission. That is actually a regulatory and policy decision. Right now, we do not currently allow what those are termed as sewer meters or deduct meters, but they are allowed in certain communities. In Northborough, they're not currently allowed, but that's something we can investigate. I'm actually in the process right now of redoing the rules and regulations both for water as well as sewer, so that's something that we can look at. Thank you.
Right over here.
James Lee, 49 Lincoln Street. I was under the impression that the Water and Sewer Department was an enterprise fund. Therefore, shouldn't this equipment be paid for out of the enterprise fund and not yet another tax burden for the taxpayers?
Mr. Moderator, it is an enterprise fund, and this is being funded through the enterprise fund.
Then why does the article read through taxation in the details?
Mr. Kadir. Oh, okay. Over here.
Mr. Moderator, through you. Actually, the motion specified that it would be paid through, it would be authorized to borrow the funds. The article says several options, but the motion specified that it would be borrowed. The debt service will be paid for out of the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. It will not affect your taxes.
Therefore, I would like to move to amend this article to delete the word taxation.
I'm sorry, the motion did not include taxation.
In the printed warrant, it does.
I will read the article before it's voted upon to make sure that everyone understands what they're voting on.
Thank you.
Over here, please.
Charles Cleary from Juniper Brook Road. These meters are going to collect information about our water usage. How often is the data collected? Daily, hourly?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
No different than our existing meters, we collect data.
Once
It
a
collects
month?
data. No, it's actually, these newer technology meters, there's multiple technologies that we have in the system right now, and that's what I'm trying to alleviate. These meters will actually record data on a less interval basis than what the existing ones do. The existing meters, they bubble up every 4 seconds and send a signal out. These new meters that we're proposing actually send a signal out, and it's like a few milliseconds that it sends the RF signal out every hour instead of
So-
every 4 seconds.
Would it be possible for some nefarious burglar to get into your system and find out that my water hasn't been used for a few days and I'm on vacation?
No, it's all data encrypted, no different than your gas meter and or electric meter.
So the data encrypted, is that something like the Obamacare situation was encrypted?
I won't answer that.
All right. Is it better? Is it going to be secure?
It's secure. It's similar to the same technology we've been using 15 years now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And thank you.
John Foraker, 99 Pleasant Street. Smart meters. I want you to think about this. A couple of years back, they told us we were going to get electric smart meters. These meters are not controlled by anything. There is no, believe me, no guarantee that the information that is coming from your house is protected by anybody else, and the system can be attacked. And like the electric meter, the water meter is telling you, or telling the towns and the electric companies that you are utilizing this much stuff at this much time. And it also tells you when you're not utilizing it. You are susceptible to no protection to your property if anybody can get into these systems, which, from my knowledge, as of now, still haven't been protected. So all the information that is coming out of a smart meter to your house, whether it be electric or water, is an unprotected source to somebody who can come in, clean your house out, and get lost somewhere while you're away. They can tell you every time you flush the toilet, every time you brush your teeth, if you're taking a shower, whatever you're doing in that house, if your washing machine is running, if you're watering your lawn, like that gentleman was just asking. Come in. And it will also tell you, tell them when you're not using it, and therefore, when you hit high peaks, they can charge more money. When you're on a low peak, they can charge less money. There is no control over any of this. So my suggestion is, before we put into any smart meters, the system that we have now in your homes is working very well. You get your water every day, your meter reads out every day, and the guy drives around town and pulls off your numbers. The other thing is that when you decide to go with the smart meters, which you do not have any protection with from the power companies, next thing you know, you're going to come home and you're going to find one attached to your house. I suggest you strongly vote against this. They are an enterprise fund. They have their own monies. You just got hit with an increase in your bills. I think it was $30, $40, and $50 for commercial, residential, and industrial. And we were going along nice and smooth with a nice thing, and then all of a sudden, boom, you got hit with that next bill telling you that you're going to pay an extra $30 for your fees for the meters or whatever else they're requiring. So my advice is to say no to water meters and wait till further down the road until anything and everything can be protected so that you can get along without being worried about somebody knocking your door in. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Mr. Foraker, I think that there's some confusion because you keep mentioning energy meters, electric meters. These are not electric meters. We're not looking at your electric. And these type of meters, like I said, bubble up every hour versus the existing technology that we have right now bubbles up and sends a signal every 4 seconds. So these will actually be 1,000 times less. If it sends us a signal every 4 seconds right now, it's sending up a signal 21,600 times in a day. These meters will send up a signal 24 times a day, once every hour. As well as the current system that we have is going to be no different than the existing, the new system is going to be no different than the existing system that we have now, which we're still going to be doing the drive-by. We have 3,000 meters and counting that are actually, the batteries in them are dying, which means that when we drive by, we will no longer be able to get a signal from your meter at all, which means that we're not going to be able to pull your meter, we're not going to be able to get your usage, the account is going to, we're not going to be able to bill anything, and we're basically going to be bankrupt.
If you can do it quickly, please.
Can I respond first?
No, I'd like to have him finish his thought.
My suggestion is to go around and change the batteries. It's not $1.5 million.
Mr. Moderator, it's not quite that simple. It's not plug and play. They're not 9-volt batteries. These are all connected to the actual devices. I'm also trying to do this, once we get into the house, this is the time that we should replace meters that are over 15 years old. They're mechanical devices. We should be replacing them. This will also help us meet the state's no lead law. That's a requirement. We are not supposed to be installing anything with lead. Those meters that you have in your house, all brass has lead, except for the new brass as of January 2014. So all of the meters that you have in your homes are subject to that. The meters that we're purchasing now do not have lead. They're actually stainless steel.
Okay, now you may speak, sir.
Thank you. I'm David Putnam, 74 Pleasant Street. I've been fortunate for the last 25 years to be in the water meter business, so I have a lot of experience with this. I've been to dozens of these meetings and presented. I guess I'll answer one of Mr. Foraker's questions first. They do not know whether you're taking a shower or flushing a toilet or watering your lawn. It's using water. There's federal mandates involved. There was a federal law enacted in January of 2014 to remove the lead from the water system for potable water, which the water meter is. So they're following that compliance. Two, there are federal statutes for accountability of water. I don't know what Northborough is, but if you're anywhere below 90% accountable, you face federal fines and you are forced to bring that accountability up. It's not possible with a 20-year-old meter. I have one in my house that's probably 8 years old, and it hasn't been tested, but I guarantee you it's not 100% accurate. Regarding the theft or the potential notice of people, whether you're home or not, the same people could see a puddle in your front lawn from a water leak and know that you're not home for an extended period of time. There's no data that suggests people are trying to get into your water meter to see if you're home or not. The entire industry is going smart metering, whether it's electric, gas, or water. It's based on efficiencies, and these are things that allow you to be more flexible. And it's one of those things that if you would just embrace the technology, one of the things Dan mentioned, and he did a great job, was this may eventually allow the to reduce the carbon footprint of a meter reader driving around in a truck, which takes fuel, energy, time, and money, to have these things read automatically inside the office of the water department. It's a very simple system, it's a very proven system, and it's one that is very affordable for this town. Thank you.
It's over here.
Mr. Moderator, the sentence that really interests me is it says the technology allows the detection of leaks. And having had a problem with one of the meters on one of our properties, we did get into paying several $1,000s more than we should have without realizing. We kept thinking that someone was using more water, and as it turned out, we had a leak. And you're telling me that you would have been able to recognize that. I think that's extremely important. As far as anything being stolen, I'm more concerned about my computer than I am about my water meter. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're fine? Okay. May I hear the individual in the back that said what?
Second.
There's been a motion to move the question. Seconded. All those in favor of moving the question, please raise your cards. Those opposed? Thank you. The chair of the Board of Selectmen suggested that I inform folks what does move the question mean. What that means is we are tired of listening to the discussion and debate, and we would like to be able to vote on this, so could you please move this along? Is that clear? Okay. So, shall we vote again, just to make sure there's no confusion? All those in favor of moving the question, please raise your cards. Those opposed? Okay, we are about ready to vote on Article 31. Before that, I'm going to... Okay. What I'm going to do is ask the opinion of a recommendation from the Appropriations Committee on Article 31.
Mr. Moderator, the Appropriations Committee recommends approval of this article.
And from the Financial Planning Committee, please.
Mr. Moderator, Financial Planning also recommends approval of this article.
Okay, this is what you're voting on for Article 31. I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $1,500,000 to pay cost of purchasing a water meter replacement and billing system for the Northborough Department of Public Works, Water and Sewer Divisions. And to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 8, 7A of the General Laws, or any other enabling authority, and with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. This one will require a 2/3 vote, so tellers, on your toes. Those in favor, please raise your cards. Those opposed? I declare that Article 31 has passed with a 2/3 vote. Article 32, Selectman Rand.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $325,000 to pay costs of rehabilitating the Edmonds Hill water tank. And to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount in the accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 8, parentheses 7C, parentheses, of the general laws, or any other enabling authority, and with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Presentation from our DPW Director.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This request funds minor repairs to the Edmund Hills water tank. This is a 1 million gallon welded steel water tank. A 2002-12 inspection report identified interior and exterior surface corrosion of the protected coatings causing exposure to the elements. Some minor rust blotches and mildew staining was evident due to the coating failure, and in order to protect the quality of the stored water and the structural integrity of this tank, this project must move forward.
Thank you. Any questions, any discussion on Article 32? Hearing none, may I have the recommendations from the Appropriations Committee?
Mr. Moderator, the Appropriations Committee recommends approval of this article.
And from the Financial Planning Committee?
Mr. Moderator, Financial Planning also recommends approval.
Thank you. This is what you're voting on for Article 32. I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $325,000 to pay cost of rehabilitating the Edmund Hills water tank, and to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 8, 7C of the general laws, or any other enabling authority, and with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. This is also a two-thirds vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Those opposed? I declare that Article 32 is passed by a two-thirds vote. At this time, I would ask that my deputy take the podium for Article 33.
Article 33, Mr. Amberson.
Ms. Moderator, I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $65,000 for the purchase of a one-ton service truck and plow for the Northborough Department of Public Works, Water and Sewer Divisions, and to meet said appropriation, the sum of $39,000 be transferred from the Water Enterprise Fund free cash, and the sum of $26,000 be transferred from the Sewer Enterprise Fund free cash.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Presentation by DPW Director Dan Nason.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. This request is to fund the replacement of a 1996 service truck and a 2004 car. Both of those vehicles will be replaced with one vehicle. Both of those vehicles, the 96 service truck and the 2004 car, were both acquired from other town departments as hand-me-downs. This one vehicle that we're looking to purchase would replace those two existing vehicles currently in use today. It'll be used to perform the regular inspections and maintenance of the town's water and sewer system, and is a vehicle that will respond to all service calls in the water and sewer department. The DPW is making a conscious effort to ensure all future vehicles are multi-use, frontline emergency response and plow vehicles. The two vehicles that we currently have, and we only have a few left after this one, the personnel is not able to actually respond to a call or a service call to a pump station or one of the water facilities. If it's snowed in, we have to go back and get a different vehicle and respond with that. So I'm just trying to make it so that all the vehicles we have are plowable vehicles, frontline vehicles, emergency response vehicles, so if they need to, they can get to the station, drop the blade, and go. Thank you. I apologize. That's it right there. I'm sorry.
Now I'll open the floor for questions or debate. Seeing no questions, can I have the recommendation from the Appropriations Committee?
Ms. Moderator, the Appropriations Committee recommends approval of this article.
And Financial Planning Committee?
Ms. Moderator, Financial Planning also recommends approval.
This is what you're voting for on Article 33. I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $65,000 for the purchase of a one-ton service truck and plow for the Northborough Department of Public Works, Water and Sewer Divisions, and to meet said appropriation, the sum of $39,000 will be transferred from Water Enterprise Fund free cash, and the sum of $26,000 be transferred from Sewer Enterprise Fund free cash. This will require a majority vote. All those in favor, raise your cards. And those opposed, raise your cards. I declare Article 33 is passed. Article 34, Board of Selectmen Chair, Mrs. Rutan.
Ms. Moderator, I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $100,000 for the purchase of a trailer-mounted vacuum jetter for the Northborough Department of Public Works Sewer Division, and to meet said appropriation, the sum of $100,000 be transferred from Sewer Enterprise Fund free cash.
Second.
Movement made and seconded. Presentation by Dan Nason.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. This request is to fund the replacement of a 1984 trailer-mounted jetter. Being over 30 years old, the existing jetter is not currently in service due to its condition. The pump is extremely weak and the freeze plugs are broken. This equipment is used for routine maintenance to flush and clean the sanitary sewers. It's also used as an emergency response vehicle to unclog blockages and can excavate various structures such as gate boxes in the roadway. Ms. Moderator?
I'll open the floor for questions and debate. Seeing none, can I have the recommendation from the Appropriations Committee?
Ms. Moderator, the Appropriations Committee recommends approval of this article.
And the Financial Planning Committee?
Ms. Moderator, Financial Planning also recommends approval of this article.
This is what you're voting for on Article 34. I move the town vote to appropriate the sum of $100,000 for the purchase of a trailer-mounted vacuum jetter for the Northborough Department of Public Works Sewer Division, and to meet said appropriation, the sum of $100,000 be transferred from Sewer Enterprise Fund free cash. This will also require a majority vote. All those in favor, raise your cards. And those opposed? I declare Article 34 is passed.
Thank you for your support.
Article 35. A motion by Mr. Norm Corbin.
Okay, I think I'm good. Article 35 is a proposal. Oh, motion. Thank you. Somebody's on top of me. Great. Let me make a motion with my glasses. There we go. I move the town vote to amend Part 1 of the Northborough Town Code, Chapter 160, Historic District Commission, Section 160.050, Historic District Established, by deleting the wording shown in strike-through and replacing it with the words shown as underlined and set forth in the warrant.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Presentation by Norm Corbin of the Historical Commission.
Article 35 is a proposal for the Peter Whitney Parsonage Historic District. The presentation I have will explain a little bit about the historic district so we're all on the same page. The Historic Districts Act was run by the state. In 1960, the law was enacted by the state legislature. The primary purpose is to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through the preservation and protection of the distinctive characteristics of buildings and places significant in the history of the town or the Commonwealth. Over 120 Massachusetts cities and towns have established at least one local historic district. Many of them have multiple districts. How are buildings in the local historic district protected? Once a historic district is accepted at town meeting, the Board of Selectmen appoints a historic district commission, and then they work with the homeowners that are in the district. Exterior alterations visible from a public way are subject to review. The Historic District Commission, they work with the property owners to make changes and additions that are harmonious with the aesthetics of the district. There are a variety of external features that are excluded from review, and I want to highlight this because there's certainly a lot of misinformation about these districts. Air conditioners, storm windows, colors of the paints of the house, materials used for roofing, driveways, walkways, landscaping, they are not included in a historic district. What's included is really the architecture of the building, and it's only the architecture of the building that's seen from a public way. So it's not involved with the interior of the building, and it's not involved with what's going on in the back of the building. It's just what's viewed from the street. To date, Northborough does have one historic district. It's the Meeting House Common Historic District, and it's centered around the Unitarian Church. It has properties on Church Street, Pleasant Street, and in Whitney Street. There are 10 properties that are involved with that particular district. In the 1980s, there was also brought up at town meeting to look at a local historic district for the parts of Main Street, and that did not pass. That was defeated at the time. Just imagine if the town center was protected. The interest in the Peter Whitney parsonage really comes from the homeowners. Putting in historic districts is driven by the owners. It's not a top-down, it's bottom-up. And Marie and Richard Niebuhr, they've asked the Historical Commission, I'm the vice chair of the Historical Commission, to help them find a way to preserve their home. And they want to preserve it for future generations because they've carefully restored it, and it has a lot of eminently historic, and it's a 1780 home, and it's at 62 Whitney Street. These are two photographs of the property. I think most people who've driven down Whitney Street would recognize the property. The highlights of the property of this home is it was first built in 1741, but it did burn down in 1780. It was a site for religious meetings from 1741 through 1744. It was the home of the first Northborough minister, Reverend John Martin, from 1746 to 1767. It was also the home of the second Northborough minister, Reverend Peter Whitney. It was from 1770 to 1816. Reverend Whitney was a real strong supporter of the Patriot cause. If you read about him, you'll see that he was a compatriot, and he had a lot of acquaintances with John Adams and John Hancock. He also published a lot of his sermons, and he also wrote the first history of Worcester County. The search for a solution. One option was to think if we could incorporate that current property, the property of the Niebuhrs, into the current historic district. It's actually too far removed from the current historic district. And it's an isolated property. Around the property that they have are a lot of modern homes. There's also another option that they looked into. It's called a preservation restriction, which is quite different than what we're discussing tonight. A preservation restriction is a very costly option. And in this case, it doesn't really work. And we also need to look at a timely solution because they expect the property to be up for sale within a year or two. So this map is trying to show in red is where their property is, in black is where the current historic district is. And you can see there's quite a few homes in between, and they're all modern. One part of that is also the candle factory development. And if you look through the neighborhood, you can see their home behind the trees, but if you look to the left and the right, you can see modern properties. So the idea that we worked out with them was the Historic District Act, which I mentioned earlier, it also allows for a single home historic district. You don't have to have a district with multiple properties. The town of Somerville has led the way with this concept. They have over 260 single home historic districts. And it works very well for isolated properties, which is the case we have with the Niebuhr's property. It's elegant, it's a no-cost solution for the property owners, their neighbors, and the town. The process. The way the process works is there was a historic district study committee that evaluated the property to see if it warranted being incorporated into, that it had enough history really to be put as a historic property. That's the first step. The second step is they prepare a study. It was been completed. It was successfully reviewed by the Massachusetts Historical Commission and the Northborough's Planning Board. We had a public hearing that was held last week to look for the public's input regarding the property. And the fourth step is where we are tonight. We have a proposal on the town warrant. And we really hope, and I'm sure the Niebuhrs really hope, that you vote yes for this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll open the floor for questions and debate.
John Campbell, 29 Spruce Hill Drive. Norm, could you explain to me and the audience what are the differences between the individual historic district and a historic preservation restriction? What are the pros and cons?
Good question. A preservation restriction, it's a very expensive process that's the first part of it. There's more than that, but I'll start with the expensive process on it. It requires a home, what happens is a homeowner pays a private entity like Historic Worcester to monitor that property for in perpetuity. I think in the Niebuhr's case, it was going to be about $15,000 to $20,000 that you give to this entity to monitor the home. There's also legal fees, which is about $5,000. But there's also an additional cost when you put a preservation restriction on the home. It really affects the cost of the house when you go to sell it. In some cases, it can bring the price of the house down because there are less people willing to purchase a house that has restrictions. Now I'll mention the restrictions. A homeowner can decide what's restricted in a preservation restriction. It's not just from the street. It can be a feature inside the house, it can be a fireplace, it can be some design work, it can be the stairwell, it can include landscaping, an outhouse, the back, a barn or anything. So it can include a lot more details, fencing. And once a year, the people who hold the people who are monitoring the home have rights to go into the home once a year and make sure that the property is being kept to what the previous owners had required. That's a perfect situation. In fact, we have 3 properties in town that do have that restriction on them. But that's not what we're discussing here. Here it's from the street and it's the architectural features. Is that part of you?
Thanks for the detail. But so in this case, are there any restrictions to the future buyer on terms of what they can do to the property? How is that monitored from your perspective in the Historic Commission?
Well, it's the historic, they set up a separate commission to monitor, there's a separate commission to monitor the historic district. And what they do is if a homeowner decides to, all subsequent homeowners, when they come into the building department and they want to modify some existing structure on the outside of the home that's visible from the street, then what they'll do is the building inspector will notify the commission and saying this is what the homeowners are planning. Then you have a meeting with the homeowners to see if they meet the guidelines of the preservation. So ideally, if they're doing restructuring on the outside, you want to keep as much as you can of the architectural features of the property. In the historic district that currently exists, most of the homeowners essentially, if you buy those types of properties, you do tend to want to do that anyway.
And finally, is the individual historic district that we vote on tonight permanent? Or
Yes.
can it be changed by a future vote?
That's a good question. My understanding is it's permanent.
Thanks very much.
Rick Aronovitz, Brewer Street. In your first slide where you gave the purpose of the historic district, it was to preserve historically significant or culturally significant properties. I have heard no testimony as to why this particular building is historically or culturally significant, other than it's old, and some ministers lived there. In addition,
It's not, go ahead, I'm sorry.
being a little suspicious of what hasn't been said and not being an accountant, I believe there are some tax advantages for having a property declared historically significant or in one of these districts. And are these homeowners going to be getting any benefits on either federal, state, or local taxes because of this?
I'm in a historic district. I do not have any benefits for my taxes. I have no benefits from the federal government. There are benefits if you have a property in the district and if it's a multi-family dwelling. You can petition the state for some grants to do renovations that are in accordance with all the state regulations for how you would do a renovation. And that for properties that have multiple dwellings, that have multiple dwellings, that can be an advantage to be able to access these fundings. But for a private home, a single homeowner like myself, or like this home, that's not the case.
Well, this home could be subdivided at some future time then.
It could. Well, it does have an apartment in it, am I correct? Yeah, so it is. So there could be some tax advantages for this home.
Okay, so there could be some tax advantages.
But this home is more than just an old home that a few ministers lived in. It does have a lot of history associated with it, especially during the Revolutionary War. And It had been opened up on several occasions to the town, and the restorations on the inside, the architecture is still there, the architecture of the outside is still there. It fits a lot of criteria of something that's historically significant for more than the town, but actually for the state.
Fran Backstrand, 76 Cedar Hill Road. I think we should take an opportunity this evening by voting yes on this to thank the neighbors for giving the town the opportunity to preserve something that is a piece of property that is important to the town and the history of the town at no cost to us. And at a minimum, it is going to preserve the exterior so that we can see what it was in its throughout the history of the home. I mean, I would love to think that the next owner would preserve the interior, which they did a lovely job with, but they're willing to take the chance that that won't happen, and we all benefit from their desire to protect it in this way, because then it will remain looking, at least on the exterior, that the house that Peter Whitney lived in. So I would really strongly encourage everyone to show our appreciation for the fact that they want us to save this property and vote yes. Thank you.
Ken Hutchins, 91 Brigham Street. If there were historic districts for people, I'd want to be one.
Are there any further questions?
Ms. Moderator, I move the question, please.
Can I have a recommendation from the Historical Commission?
The Historical Commission is in favor, unanimous favor for this, adopting this.
And this is what you're voting on Article 35. I move the town vote to amend Part 1 of the Northborough Town Code, Chapter 160, Historic District Commission, Section 160.050, Historic District Established, by deleting the wording shown in strike-through and replacing it with the words shown as underlined as set forth in the warrant. This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed? I declare Article 35 is passed by a 2/3 vote.
I'd like to take this time to say that the young people of Northborough have impressed me time and time again. And Ms. Danielle Robbins has impressed me significantly by being willing to come up here and face this crowd and handle herself in an excellent manner. So let's give her a hand. It also scares me that she may be nipping at my heels. Article 36. Mr. Corbin.
I move the town vote to pass over this article.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Can you enlighten us as to why we're passing over this article?
I'd like to turn it over to town council, please. Or John?
Yes.
This article was originally proposed and put on the warrant by the Board of Selectmen. A subsequent review by town council determined that it didn't require town meeting approval. This is something the Board of Selectmen can do through their normal actions at a meeting, so it doesn't require town meeting. We had to leave it on the warrant, though, because all of the other articles had already been published, so for the sake of consistency, we left it on, knowing that we'd be passing over it tonight.
Thank you. All those in favor of passing over Article 36, please raise your cards. Those opposed? Article 36 is passed over. Article 37. Mr. Corbin.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to amend the Northborough Town Code, Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 2-36, Historic Buildings, subsection 236030, Procedure, by deleting the wording shown in strike-through and replacing it with words shown as underlined as set forth in the warrant.
Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Corbin, your presentation, please.
Article 37 is a proposal for changing the demolition delay, which is currently at 6 months, to 12 months. And I'll walk through the presentation of people, make sure people understand that we do have a demolition delay, what that means, and why we would prefer to go to a 12-month demolition delay. There is a demolition delay bylaw in town. It's in the Northborough Municipal Code, Chapter 236, Historic Buildings, and I'll read this. This bylaw is enacted for the purpose of protecting the historically and architecturally significant buildings within the town and to really encourage the owners of such properties to seek out persons who might be willing to purchase, preserve, rehabilitate, or restore such buildings rather than demolish them. So how does this system work today? The process starts when a demolition permit is requested for a property that's over 100 years old. A review of the property is conducted to determine if it is historically or architecturally significant. If it's deemed significant, then the delay period can be invoked. What's the purpose? It's really to allow time. What we're trying to buy here is more time. It allows time for an owner, the Historical Commission, and the public to pursue alternatives to demolition. One option would certainly be find a buyer who's willing to preserve the property. Another one would be to incorporate the structure into a new development, move the structure, or maybe even find a way to have purchase a preservation restriction to eliminate any future demolition. Northborough's experience. We are seeing an increased pace of demolitions for antique buildings in this town, primarily because there's a lack of undeveloped land. Historic buildings can be on large lots. Certainly the desirability of living in Northborough, the economic growth. There was an article recently of business and workers moving into the Metro West, which was in the Sunday T&G just this year. And there's a limited interest from developers to actually consider the alternatives. And the current 180 days really provides no incentive. What we'd like to do is extend that so the developers going in could recognize, well, maybe these properties are worth salvaging, or maybe there's a way of appreciating them and incorporating them into the new designs. Oop, I went the wrong way. What did I? All right, nope. The town currently has about 200 buildings that are over 100 years old. You have to keep in mind, there's 200 buildings are 100 years old, but it's only those that are deemed significant that would come under this bylaw. And I've been on the Historic Commission now for about 8 years. It's probably about twice a year do we see a home that wants to be demolished that's over 100 years old. And in my 8 years, there's been 3 that we've deemed to be historically significant. Right now, the protections on the home, the older homes in town, there are 10 that are protected in the historic district that are around the Unitarian Church. And thanks to you tonight, there's another one, the Niebuhr property is also protected. And there are also 3 in town that have the more involved preservation restrictions. The purpose of the demolition delay is, again, is really to provide time to look at alternatives. So I think we've seen in the past few months, actually, several buildings we've called significant were 9 Monroe Street and 130 Main Street. And they've both been taken down. The developers, they did look for other opportunities, but we would have liked to have been able to extend it for another 6 months. These are properties also on Main Street that are coming down soon. One is 65 West Main, that's the Pierce property with the old gas station. That'll be coming down shortly. And then the West Main Street building is also due to come down. We just picked a couple of properties on our list that we have of the older homes. The Nathaniel Fay House has 1.7 acres. The William Halloway House has 5 acres, and then we all know White Cliffs, which is now up for sale, has 7 acres associated with it. These are some local examples that are in other towns. There's the first one on the top is in Marlborough, where they incorporated the old home and they were built off the back. And the one is Weston on Route 20, where they took advantage of the old property and added on to it. But there are some examples in Northborough, and there's more than two. There's quite a few developers that actually have a situation where they take advantage of this. One of my favorite ones is on Hudson Street, where they could have demolished the home, but instead they refurbished the front home and added 4 condos into the back. And that's exactly the kind of development that we'd like. And the other house on Main Street they just turned it into an office, and they remodeled the home and kept the style. So the current delay period is 6 months. The state has recommended longer delay periods provide better results in preserving threatened buildings. And the Mass Historic Commission, they recommend a minimum delay period of 12 months. 12 months is not uncommon. In some of the nearby communities with 12 months are Boxborough, Upton, Dudley, and Worcester. Quite a few towns are going to 18 months, and we've listed a few of them here, the 8 that are on 18-month delay. So the Historical Commission's mission is to identify, evaluate, and preserve the historical heritage of the town of Northborough. That's our mission, and that's why we're proposing this article change. We feel a minimum of 12-month demolition delay period is necessary to help achieve preservation goals. So we'd appreciate a vote of yes on Article 37. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, any debate on Article 37? Yes.
Mark Tessier, 35 Colburn Street. 12 months is nice from a historical commission perspective, but I think from a private property owner perspective, it's a long time. If you're trying to sell something, 12 months is a long time to wait to have to sell it instead of, let's say, 6 months. I also noticed there's no provision here if your historic building is becoming a safety hazard. There's apparently no provision for speeding up that demolition. I'm not sure that's a good thing, so I can't support this article.
Can I respond?
You certainly may.
All right. The entire demolition delay does have one statement in it. If the building is unsafe or condemned, it will be torn down. It bypasses the whole system completely. So the derelict building will come down. And your first point, 12 months, it does sound like a significant amount of time. The property at 130 Main Street, which just came down within the last couple of weeks, that process has been going on for almost 2.5 years, I think. The property on Main Street, the Pierce property with the gas station, that's over a year. So any developer that's actually going to do a major, effort, by the time he gets all his ducks in a row, he's looking at something that's at least 12 months anyway. So the 12 months is not an uncommon situation for these big projects.
Over here, please. Yes.
Oh, Ann St. John, 48 Main Street. I had a question, although you just addressed some of it. Since it took much longer than 12 months and those properties weren't saved, what is the value of pushing it to 12 months for all of them? I have a house well over 150 years old, and I could be transferred any day, and I might need to leave it, and I don't want to wait a year to potentially sell that house. I can't imagine that it would be demolished for development. I don't have that much property, so most of this seems to address those that have property. Lots of property, but it affects all of us for that 12-month increase.
It doesn't, if your property is sold, that doesn't enter into this. The only time that this comes into play is if somebody wants to demolish your property.
Right.
And your home could be demolished. My home could be demolished. So it's a way of, it's just a way of looking at trying to look for alternatives.
So what is significant? You keep putting it in, and what is significant? It's significant to me. It's my house. I love it. But what does that mean in the scope of this discussion?
A significant property, the way the system works, we're flagged that the house will be demolished. There's a demolition permit out for the property. And then the Historical Commission is notified. What we do is we go back to our archives to see the history on the property. We work with the Historical Society, which is tremendous archives on the property itself. We look for two items. One item is there architectural features of the property that make it historically significant. So if it has a lot of exterior renovations, it may not fall under that category. If it has historical, either people who lived in the town that had a real impact on the town or had some historical attributes of the town's history or even broader than that, then that could flag it. The properties that I had up on the, just to give you an idea, so it's hard to fit that criteria. The properties that we deemed significant on the slide, the Monroe property, we deemed it significant because of its architectural features, the mansard roof and that like. What happened just recently is the new building that's going in is actually they've complemented the new building with some attributes of the mansard roof, which we really appreciate. There was another home was on there, the Hunt property, which is at 130 Main. That was deemed significant because it was one of the buildings, it was one of the first industries for shoe manufacturing in the town. And there was enough information about the owners, and they had a shoe factory there that we felt that was significant. But like I mentioned earlier, of the some 20 properties that have come up in the last 8 years, we've only found 3 that have been, we felt really are significant.
But one key piece I forgot, I'm sorry, standing up here, I forgot it, is it's any part of it. If I needed to demolish a part of the house, this affects it as well, right? This bill? You know, I have like 3 sections to my home. That back section needs a lot of, change. So if I wanted to take that down, this would affect that as well, right?
This is really written for the complete demolition of the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll reread it. Okay.
Over here, please.
Yes, Doug Stone again. I'm a realtor in town, as people may know. I agree with the gentleman earlier that said that he could be impacted by waiting a year. I think that is a long time. But on the other hand, I can see from experience that the Monroe property was trying to be sold, was marketed rather for a long time, and nobody, wanted to buy it. I guess my first question might be with the community preservation funds that we have available, if something was really significant, wouldn't we be able to purchase it?
That is possible.
So I think, from a safety point of view, just waiting the extra time, I believe that property was vacant. It invites vandalism and safety, and I think that overall it's just the year is too long to to require somebody. I think it's an adverse situation for the homeowner. So anyway, I think that I can see the point of view of the trying to extend it. I mean, at the least, I would want to propose an amendment for 9 months instead of 12. So would I have to do that after the discussion, Mr. Moderator, or?
Excuse me, could you repeat that again? I couldn't hear.
If I wanted to propose an amendment, would I have to do that after the discussion was done?
Actually, you can propose that. You can do that amendment at this time if you wish.
Yeah.
I need it in writing.
Okay.
And I would ask you that, you give town council a chance to take a peek at it.
Okay, sure.
For those of you that are wondering what's going on, with the Article 37, Mr. Stone has suggested that we amend that article. He is in the process of writing that amendment. It will then be presented. We will vote on that amendment. If we choose to go with the amendment, we will go that way. If not, if the amendment gets rejected, then we go back to the original article and vote on that or continue the discussion. Mr. Stone? What I'm going to ask Mr. Stone, if you could make that motion, and if we could get a second for that, we can then address the amendment.
I move that the town amend the proposed Section B for Article 37 to state, during the 270-day period, the commission will invite the applicant, parentheses, and owner of record if different from the applicant, parentheses, to participate in investigation of alternatives to demolition.
So my understanding is that you have changed the 365 days to 270 days. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I have not heard a second yet. Motion has been made and seconded. What we're going to do now is discuss the amendment. Okay, and the amendment is changing the period of time from 365 to 270. Is that something you're willing to address?
No.
Okay. Then is there anyone that's standing up now that wishes to address that? Mr. Campbell.
John Campbell, 29 Spruce Hill Drive, also with the Community Preservation Commission. One thing that's been overlooked is, I believe, part of the Historical Commission's proposal to extend it 12 months is to take advantage of the opportunity for the town to consider the purchase of an historic property that might otherwise be demolished. For instance, if a property was going to be sold and the seller wished to demolish it, but the town wished to explore whether it should be purchased for historic means, they might want to come back to town meeting and ask the town to consider that. One means of purchasing that property might be the Community Preservation Fund reserves, which we'll be hearing about later, and into which the Historic Commission has asked to contribute an amount yearly. The town has approved it, and it's that reserve fund that we might use to buy that property. With a 365-day delay, it would give the opportunity that at least one town meeting would occur within that cycle. And a 270-day period would not allow for that. So I recommend that the amendment be defeated.
Other comments regarding the amendment? Yes, ma'am.
Although Janice Height, 181 East Main Street, that's the brick house directly behind Stan's Barbecue. I've lived here since 1958. I would oppose the amendment because as a member of the Appropriations Committee for the last 10-plus years, I would look upon that kind of purchase as a money pit, having lived in an old house for over 50 years.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a comment. My name is Marie Wyman. I live on 13 Brendan Drive in Northborough, and I was a member of the Historic Commission for 8 years. I just want to comment about this whole situation in town. I want everyone here tonight to search their conscience and think about the historical assets of the town. And when you drive through Chatham, or when you drive through Concord, or Lexington, or any of the old, venerable towns that are proud of their heritage, I want you to really understand the significance of what is being discussed tonight. And when you drive down Main Street, and you have the opportunity to look at those vacant buildings that are molding, falling down, and seedy looking, I want you to really think about what we're talking about this evening. And then sit and look at some of the beautiful photographs of years gone by and what our town looked like. Don't forget that James Minchner, in his beautiful book, Hawaii, mentioned the beautiful town of Marlborough in Hawaii. Those missionaries were from Marlborough, Massachusetts. Yes, we have to protect individuals that live in this town, but we also need to be intelligent and see into the future of the historical assets that we own in this town. Thank you.
The gentleman that's second over here,
First, I want to comment on some information that was given
may I
earlier
have
about
your name and address, please?
Rick Aronovitz, Brewer Street.
Thank you.
Lady was asking if she had a partial demolition, and what the bill actually does say is that if you are applying for a demolition permit, which you would need for either partial or complete demolition, and if any part of your building is 100 years old or older, then this would apply. So I think that information should be considered. The other thing I want to comment on in general is that there are a number of articles in tonight's agenda that significantly take away people's liberties and freedoms. I think we should be asking ourselves, if you own a piece of property, why do you even need a demolition permit to demolish it? If it's yours, why can't you demolish it? Why do you need somebody else's permission to do that? And in this particular case, why do you need somebody's permission and have to wait a year to do it? You know, if it's your building, why can't you demolish it? If it has historical significance, which makes it more valuable, then it's in your interest not to demolish it. And I think we should rely on people's abilities to protect their own self-interests rather than let somebody else do it and tell us what to do. Thank you.
Mr. Stone.
Quick question. I thought that when the Community Preservation Act was set up to be able to cover, I think it was 5 different categories, I thought that that fund that was earmarked for the historical properties could be used without the town meeting approval if a significant property came along. Is that true?
Mr. Campbell?
That is not true, as the law is currently written. The historic reserve any use of the historic reserve must be voted on by town meeting each year.
We
No.
can't hear with your discussion. Please use the
No,
microphone.
none of that fund can be used toward an historic purpose or historic renovation or preservation purpose without an additional town meeting vote. So some of the articles at this year's town meeting will ask to either use that reserve or other CPA revenue, just as we've done in previous years.
Mrs. Hutchins.
Priscilla Hutchins, Brigham Street. I'm concerned, as I look at our lives today, I see that very little has value. We're raising a generation of children who have no relationship to what's gone on before. I see when we go to the sports events, nobody places their hand over their heart. Teams of athletics in high schools and so forth. Very few towns do these children have respect. They have no relationship to World War II. They have no relationship to World War I or the Vietnam War. The fact that people have stood for our country and fought. And this is relative to these homes because they are our progenitors. And we didn't grow up in Northborough, but we grew up. And we come from towns that have these people that we should have some respect for and some interest in what they left. And if you could go into the Niebuhr's home and see how every detail of that home, the curtains, the bedspreads, whatever, very, very authentic. And it is a value, it would be a value to have the high school children go into these homes and see what they had and to learn how they had no bathrooms and how they had to carry their water and whatever. I mourn for the lack of looking back and seeing where we came from and how fortunate we are, how grateful we should be for those people who fought for what we have. And we should never forget, never, never forget.
Okay, we are still having discussion about the amendment for Article 37. I will in just one moment. Ma'am, do you have a statement that is about the amendment?
Yeah, Ann St. John, 48 Main Street. I don't see the value of any increase beyond the existing 6 months. So I wouldn't see that amendment as being more valuable than what's up on 37 as it is.
Okay.
I think, I think some people are losing track of what is being said here tonight and why some of us are standing up. I was born and raised in this town. I appreciate this town, and I've seen a lot of change. And it has nothing to do with whether my house is over 100 years old. It has to do with the fact that there might be times people have to get out of a house and have to sell that house. And to have a 1-year restriction because my house is 150 years old is not appropriate unless you're willing to come in and pay my taxes and take that house while I move to a new job out the West Coast. So I think we have to think a little bit about what we're trying to pass here. If it's a historical situation, as the parsonage, which is beautiful, and I'm thrilled that went through, then let's take it that way. But let's not infringe on everyone's ability to move economically as they need to.
All right. What we're going to do is vote on the amendment. The amendment states that I move the town vote to amend the Northborough Town Code, Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 2-36, Historic Buildings, subsection 2-36-030, Procedure, by deleting the words shown in strike-through and replacing it with the words shown underlined. And the specific statement that it's addressing is that the time frame would be modified from the original proposed 365 days to 270 days. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your cards. Those opposed? The amendment does not carry. We are back to Article 37. Mrs. Height? Mrs. Height, you had something you want to say?
Well, I wanted to express my opposition to the motion as it is presented. 6 months is more than long enough to find someone to buy it if anyone wants to. Should I have identified myself again?
We'll let it go this time, but don't do it again.
Okay. But at any rate, you know, when we bought the property that I live in now, it was a basket case, and we should have torn it down then, because it's just a everlasting money pit. It is not a good residential area. It's going to become less than that with the opening of another building across Route 20. That will be a more lively entertainment center than the existing ones. In addition to that, it is very difficult to sell houses that age because you can't sell them quickly. Someone might come along in 6 months and buy it, but it's very likely that they wouldn't. We sold a large piece of land, and it took us 10 years to do it. So I can't imagine what this is. But I live there by myself now, and my obligation is to provide the best possible return for my children and grandchildren, which I can't do if I have to find a buyer for the house as it exists. I frankly find the whole idea of this so-called historic preservation being expressed in a great part by people who don't live in houses that are historically accurate, et cetera, or even historically existent. You know, I just spent $8,000 this year on oil, so I can't, and I can go on and on about the cost of maintaining a house of that age. So I would urge you to vote against this. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell.
Norm, in an attempt to clarify what we're voting on, am I correct that there is nothing in this article that prevents one from selling one's home? Or delays it at all?
No, this only comes in, the way the process is set up, it only comes to light when a demolition request is asked for, is through the building department.
So again, it's whether, it comes into play if a current owner wants to demolish.
Yes.
Or if someone buys a home and then that new owner wants to demolish.
Yes.
But it has nothing to do with the selling process.
Correct.
So it restricts no one who owns an historic home from selling it if one wants.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Durkin.
Michael Durkin, Moore Lane, Northborough. I would urge you to vote against this for one reason. The 12 months is financial hardship for anybody who's involved in the process. I saw earlier that they had the White Cliffs on, and I've been hired to sell the White Cliffs, and we are going to move forward with the sale. But in the background, what we've been doing before we get and put a sign out there is we're offering it back to the Smith & Wesson Company to buy it as a museum. And it's a long process to do that. So this process starts when somebody applies for a demolition permit. And if we're going to do something like this, why not start it at the time it goes to the market? And I know that's an amendment, and I don't feel like making an amendment, but inherently, I look at this as a restriction of property rights. Mrs. Height brings up a very good point, is in the older houses, they suffer from functional obsolescence, and the cost of restoring it and making it ADA compliant and handicapped and everything is significant. I mean, the White Cliffs is a beautiful piece of property, but to convert that into a residential use or to convert it and preserve the historical significance of it is going to cost considerable amount of money. And who's going to have it and who's going to do it, and all that needs to be addressed. But if you would put this 12-month restriction on during the year from 2005 to 2006, or then again from 2006 to 2007, the plummeting in property values in Northborough was severe, to the tune of perhaps in excess of 20%. And I think Mrs. St. John raised a valid issue, is who pays that money? Is it fair to the homeowner, the property owner, who needs to sell and needs to move on, and they want to reuse the land underneath the property? Because a lot of your use comes from the land beneath the building, because the building suffers from the obsolescence. And who pays that loss of value, which could be staggering in cases? So I would urge you all to preserve your property rights and vote no on Article 37. Thank you.
Hearing no other discussion or questions, I ask the recommendations from the Planning Board on Article 37.
Rick Leaf, Chairman, Planning Board, 30 Wells Farm Road.
The planning board gave this serious consideration. A lot of the points that were raised tonight came up in the planning board discussion. Our feeling was we are in favor of demolition delays. We think the 6-month delay is appropriate. We feel that this amendment, or this motion as proposed here, paints a very broad brush across the town. There are many homes at this point, since it'll be any home constructed 1914 and before would now be under the purview of this, and more homes every year will become 100 years old. We feel that although it may not affect the sale directly, it could affect prospective buyers' view of a property if he knew there was a 1-year demolition delay that was required. And we feel that does put some homeowners at an unfair disadvantage. We also feel that if there was a very significant property that the Historic Commission of the town wanted to buy in a 6-month time frame, a special town meeting could be called. This could be brought before the town. Reserve funds in the CPA could be allocated, and an action could be taken. So our feeling is that a 6-month delay is still appropriate, and the planning board voted 4-0 with one member absent to not support this article.
May I hear from the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee, please? Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. The committee voted to stay with the 6 months, so we voted negatively on this.
Thank you. This is what you're voting on for Article 37. I move the town vote to amend the Northborough Town Code, Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 2-36, Historic Buildings, subsection 2-36-030, Procedure, by deleting the word shown in strike-through and replacing it with words shown as underlined, as set forth in the warrant. This is a majority vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed? Article 37 does not pass.
Thank you for your time and very informative discussion. I appreciate that.
Article 38, Registered Marijuana Dispensary Bylaw. Planning Board Chair, Mr. Rick Leaf.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, by adding paragraph G7G to section 705-020, classification of uses, in chapter 705 use regulations, by adding a new entry for registered marijuana dispensary to section 705-030, table 1, table of uses, Part B, commercial and industrial districts, and by adding to chapter 710 special regulations, a new section 710-070, registered marijuana dispensary, all is set forth in the warrant.
Motion has been made and seconded. The presentation will be by Mr. Leaf.
The purpose of this article is to update our zoning in consideration of the question that was passed in 2012 at the state ballot, legalizing marijuana for medical purposes. And tonight we're going to talk about how we feel we should modify our zoning to deal with this in the town of Northborough. The question was approved at the statewide ballot in November of 2012, And in Northborough, 61% of the voters in Northborough voted in favor of this question. Once the approval was given at the state level, the State Department of Public Health developed regulations around the setting up, approval, and management of these registered marijuana dispensaries. The regulations cover all aspects of RMD operation. Individual towns are not involved in developing the regulations for the RMDs. The Department of Public Health grants the licenses to the RMD applicants. Once again, that's not done at the town level, that's done at the state level. And the legislation as passed basically says there can be, at this point, no more than 35 of these in the state of Massachusetts. There could be no more than 5 in one county. And no dispensaries were approved for the town of Northborough for calendar year 2014. At this point, the closest RMD to us was approved in the city of Worcester. As far as individuals go, an individual needs certification from a doctor indicating that they have a condition, normally some sort of a treatment of extreme pain that can be treated best by the use of medical marijuana. In some cases, it's provided in a form to be inhaled. In some cases, it's provided in a pill form. In some cases, it's been proven to be effective in treatment of skin diseases like eczema and psoriasis, and it's provided in a salve version. So the actual active ingredient in the marijuana is extracted and is produced in many different forms. It could be, like I said, inhaled. It could be ingested as a pill. It could be put on your skin as a salve. If an individual lives far enough away from a facility where they can't get to it easily, the state can grant that individual the ability to grow up to a 6-month supply in their home. And there's also the provision that an RMD can distribute this medical marijuana to a home. And so, in other words, the certified user doesn't have to go to a clinic. That can be driven over to the home and delivered to the person that way. The regulations prohibit an RMD from locating in any residential districts, but they allow them in any commercial or industrial district. This is an area, though, where the town has some flexibility in choosing in which zoning districts it chooses to locate these if they were approved from the town. The DPH regulations prohibit an RMD from locating within 500 feet of a place where children routinely congregate, typically schools, daycare centers, parks, playgrounds, a library, things like that. Once again, the town has flexibility to change that setback requirement. The town cannot, although effectively, prohibit the siting of an RMD if it's approved by the DPH. So if, in fact, some organization goes before the State Department of Public Health, makes a presentation to say that they can provide one of these facilities in the town of Northborough, and the State Department of Public Health agrees with that and grants that license, then in fact, that operation will be sited in Northborough under whatever our zoning regulations are, and we're going to propose tonight a couple of changes to these state requirements that we feel are appropriate for the town of Northborough. So in the absence of any zoning, if a town does not have any particular zoning in place for RMDs, then they can be located anywhere in an industrial zone or a commercial zone, and they need to be located no closer than 500 feet from place where children routinely congregate. So if in fact we choose not to approve the suggestions being recommended by the planning board tonight, this is what we would revert to. And some towns may choose to do this. Once again, we feel there are some steps we can take to regulate these a little more closely in Northborough. There were moratoriums allowed after the law was passed and the DPH had not yet provided regulations. Certain towns implemented moratoriums until the regulations were produced. Seeing as those were produced in 2013, the Attorney General has stated that no moratoriums will be allowed, and it turns out we've learned since we've done these slides that the end date is now November 30th, 2014. After that, the Attorney General will not allow any towns to implement moratoriums any longer. The feeling is enough time has gone by since the regulations have been produced, the towns can decide how they want to proceed. Now, we do have Article 39, a proposed moratorium, the next article here. The reason that's on the warrant is that if, in fact, for some reason, this Article 38 fails tonight, I'm going to propose that we put a moratorium in place until 11/30/2014 to give the Planning Board a chance to respond to the discussion tonight, to come back with another proposal. But once again, we would need to do that before the end of the year. We'd need to call a special town meeting to bring that up. Once again, the Planning Board feels that just defaulting to allowing RMDs any place in our commercial or industrial zones is not appropriate for Northborough. We feel that the regulations provided by the DPH, we reviewed them with the town planner, are appropriate, and they go into excruciating levels of detail as to what needs to be done as far as siting, security, management, reporting, disposal of waste, and things like that. We asked Chief Leahy to attend one of our meetings to get his opinion. The chief felt also that the DPH regulations were very complete. His opinion was that most likely in residential towns like Northborough, we probably wouldn't see RMDs being proposed. More likely they're going to go into more metropolitan and urban types of environments, and that's what we've seen so far. It turns out that in the western part of the state, nothing was approved out in Berkshire County, and there's going to be some concerns that there may be some people in Berkshire County that do get doctor certification to have medical marijuana, and maybe the closest dispensary is going to be in Springfield or something like that. There are going to be some issues like that. So far, experience seems to be showing that metropolitan or urban kind of areas are where these are being cited. Beyond that, the chief of police felt that the regulations that we are talking about that we're going to propose tonight were reasonable for the town of Northborough. So in our discussions, there were a couple of things that came up. The first is that marijuana is still prohibited at the federal level. And the U.S. Attorney General has stated that those states who choose to adopt either for medical use or for recreational use legalization of marijuana, that as long as it's observed that the use of marijuana is following the regulations in those states, that even though it's federally prohibited, the Federal Department of Justice will not take action in those states. Banks, though, are federally regulated, and banks are very concerned that as long as marijuana is still illegal at the federal level, it could have some impact on the regulation and the oversight of the banks. So one thing that's happened is that the major banks that do the credit card processing will not accept credit card transactions for marijuana dispensaries in states where it's been approved. That means that it's a cash-only business. And because people can purchase up to a 6-month supply, and because the cost of taking the active ingredients in marijuana and processing it into a pill form or a salve form is fairly expensive, these transactions are going to run into the thousands of dollars. So a lot of money is going to change hands. Either people are going to go to these dispensaries with a few $1,000s, pay and take their product out. The dispensary is going to hold a lot of this money for a period of time, or there could be some transactions. If there's a delivery, someone drives into a neighborhood and gets a lot of money transacted at the home and brought back to the dispensary. We felt that although in terms of the misuse of the marijuana, we're not exactly sure how that's going to go. There is a problem or a concern here about the possibility of some crime in the cash nature of the business. And that led us to believe that citing something like this in industrial districts, out of the way, out of sight, out of mind, may increase the possibility of this kind of crime on a cash business. And we weren't too crazy about something like this in the center of our town either. There was also a lot of discussion around, are the drugs in your CVS more dangerous and more powerful behind the counter there, the prescription drugs, than marijuana? And the answer is probably they are, and is really a dispensary no different than a drugstore. And to a certain extent, just based on the type of drugs you're talking about, that may be the case. And so why not just allow these things to be located in commercial districts like you'd allow drugstores to be located in commercial districts? But once again, due to the nature of the cash nature of the business and the fact that it's new and we're not sure how this is going to work, the majority of people on the planning board still were concerned about locating these in the center of our town or in industrial districts. So basically,
what we've come down to is we're proposing that we allow any RMDs to be located in our highway business district. In a second, I'll put up a map and show you where that is, but that's basically our zoning district out along Route 9, where Route 9 intersects with Route 20. And that we feel, because of the size of that district, that a 500-foot setback, as proposed in the DPH regulations from places where children routinely congregate, would almost close off all the area in that zoning district, would almost effectively prohibit anything from being proposed to be placed there. So we figure that a 300-foot setback, as you'll see on the map, allows at least some possibility that if an RMD was approved for Northborough, it could be sited at least in this zone. The 300-foot setback is also consistent with the drug-free zone around schools, that the regulation is that if there's anyone caught with drugs or selling drugs within 300 feet of a school property, the penalties for that are more severe than in other places. So the 300-foot setback also is kind of consistent with the drug-free zone provision. This is the downtown business district. The area you see outlined in the dark black line is the district. You can see Route 20 sort of comes down and goes through the district kind of in the left-hand side there, just a little bit where it intersects with Route 9. As you kind of move down Route 9, which is in the center of the district, you sort of come down to near where the Walmart is. Do you have the pointer? Thank you. So this area right here is kind of where Walmart is kind of located right now. And then as we head down in here, this is the area where the new baseball facilities, where the 920 driving range used to be, where New England baseball is going in. Wegmans and the Northborough Crossing is here, Avalon is here. And what we're showing is in the dark blue, there are 3 areas that we consider to be places where children routinely congregate. This baseball facility would be one, even though it's not in the downtown, the highway business district, it's near it. This is Teamworks over here. And in the zone itself, there's a small plot of land in the dark blue here that's owned by the YMCA that's not developed right now. But our expectation is it was developed, it'd probably be a place where children routinely congregate. And in the light blue, you can see the 300-foot setback. So the areas in white in the downtown business zone are the areas where, in fact, if there was an RMD approved for Northborough, it could be located. If you, in fact, went to a 500-foot setback, which would pretty much double the size of these light blue areas, there really wouldn't be a whole lot of area left inside of this zone to locate anything. So we felt, based on the location of the zone and based on having at least some reasonable area to site one of these if it was approved, that this zone made the most sense and the 300-foot setback made the most sense for the zone. So we propose tonight then, in the wording that you see in the bylaw, in fact, that we prohibit RMDs every place in town except for this highway business district, and that we go with a 300-foot setback. As I said before, all the rest of the regulation of the RMD is in the state DPH regulations. The town doesn't have the ability to modify or change any of those. And as I said before, in discussion with the chief of police, he felt comfortable, as we did, that the DPH regulations effectively would monitor these. So we'd ask for your support for these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate from the floor on Article 38?
Mark Tessier, 35 Colburn Street. The way I look at this is it's a lawful business. It's heavily regulated by the state already. And to me, it just looks like, as you mentioned, another version of CVS. They're passing out prescription drugs. So on that basis, I don't see a strong need for Northborough to place additional regulations on illegal business. To address one of your concerns about crime because they have a lot of cash, I think that the owners of these RMDs, if they show up, will take care of that themselves. They certainly have an incentive to, and there's lots of ways to handle it. Armored cars, safes like that are safes. I also note that jewelry stores and banks have the same problem. They seem to be addressing it. So I'm comfortable that an RMD could address that as well. And my suggestion would be that we don't regulate these any differently than we do with CVS. And we don't have a moratorium on them either. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Rick Aronovitz, Brewer Street. I also happen to be a registered pharmacist, have been for over 40 years. And I can tell you that the reason it was made legal was for some very valid reasons. That there are cancer sufferers, I have a brother-in-law who happens to be one, who have a valid and necessary need for this. And I don't think that demagogic and disingenuous arguments should be used to exclude clinics from convenient locations where people could get a product that's now legal and that they can use, and that are far less dangerous than many of the drugs dispensed in drugstores, narcotic drugs, which are far more harmful and dangerous. As far as the cash goes, maybe they won't take credit cards, but they can still do PayPal, they can do checks, they can do all kinds of other payment media that don't involve large amount of cash. And even if they do, that's not our problem. I think this whole measure should be defeated. It's just duplicate regulation and legislation that just piles it on top of the existing state and federal regulations. And these are basically health clinics that should be allowed in any zone that would allow a health clinic. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Shahara Drew, 2 Vanessa Drive. I just have a question. I'm really not concerned so much about debating whether or not marijuana for medicinal purposes is appropriate. I mean, I think it is. My question is a bit more selfish, to be quite truthful, and I'd like to know if anyone has done a study on property values, because there's a difference between perception and reality, and regardless of whether or not we all think that having medicinal marijuana facilities in town is okay, when I go to sell my house, I don't really know what public perception is going to be. So it really is a question, and I don't know if a study has been done, but I would like to know what effect having these facilities has actually on properties, right? I mean, because we can all agree to some extent that there are certain places where jails, for example, are necessary, but when it comes to property values, there's a very real effect. So I don't know if you or anyone else could address that.
There was no data that we were able to find at this point that had any, that addressed that issue, so I can't answer that question. I'm not sure if, I'd say at this point there's no data that we've been able to find to address that issue.
My name's Amy White, Brigham Street, Northborough. My question is, Route 20, parts of it are considered business zone, am I correct?
Along Route 20?
Yes.
The
Route 20 is not on there, but I'm just saying Route 20 east to west, are there parts?
Yeah, so through the center of town, we have multiple business zones in the center of Route 20.
Correct, so it could go into parts of Route 20, correct? Not just Route 9.
I'm still not sure I understand your question. I mean, the highway business zone we're talking about here.
Yes, but also there's a highway business zone on Route 20.
No, there's.
No?
No. This is, we only have one highway business zone in town, and this is it.
Oh, then my question is, can it go into the business zones on Route 20?
Today, what we're proposing would not allow that. It would prohibit that.
But if we didn't accept this proposal,
right,
it could go on Route 20?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Michael Powell, 360 Whitney. A question. Is there a risk that this zoning would be seen as so restrictive by the state as to be effectively prohibiting the facilities? Are there viable sites within that? I mean, that's a very small slice of the town. Is there a risk of that?
No, we don't think there is. We took a look at a couple of other towns that have already passed zoning that looked something like this, and that was all approved by the Attorney General, so we don't think that this would be disapproved by the Attorney General.
Doug Stone, 33 Birch Hill Road. Quick question. Would the 300-foot buffer apply to the hotel that is near Lawrence Street, which I believe may house homeless families and therefore constitute an area that minors congregate?
That didn't come up in our discussions. I guess the answer would be, Kathy, you want to speak to that?
As far as I'm aware, the state places sometimes the homeless families in the hotel that's closer to, the name escapes me, it's on Route 9. Thank you, the Econo Lodge. So in this particular highway business district, we did not include the motel that's there.
Mr. Pember.
George Pember, Hamilton Road. I unfortunately was not present at the planning board meeting when the vote was taken. I was out of town at a wake. But I wanted to join the other planning board member who voted against this particular proposition. In my view, this is a business, and there's no reason why this is so much more dangerous than any other business that it should be prohibited. There's a lot more cash in the Bank of America than there's ever going to be in a medical marijuana dispensary, but we don't prohibit banks. The chief of police came and basically said to us he's much more worried about people breaking into the CVS and stealing hard drugs than he is for people going into one of the medical marijuana dispensaries. So from a safety standpoint, I don't see where it's more dangerous. I think this is a business, and like Mr. Rick Aronovitz said, I think it should be allowed. So I'm opposed to this. And I wanted people to know that the planning board was split on this. It was a 3-to-1 vote. Had I been able to attend, it would have been a 3-to-2 vote. So it's not a unanimous proposal that's come before you tonight. Please think long and hard about whether we want to be telling businesses, don't come to Northborough. I'm not sure that's a good message.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Teresa Capobianco, 34 Samuel Gamwell Road. I also sit on the planning board and voted in favor of this article. And the reason we did that, a lot of consideration was put into, one, whether we actually needed this article, and then having determined that an article at least addressing some of the concerns that have been brought up at various meetings was necessary. The question was then, where are we going to put this? And we spent a lot of time evaluating the industrial areas versus the highway business district versus other business districts, and ultimately determined that the industrial areas were too remote, and it really gave the potential for an increase in crime. This area seemed to be the best area for this type of a business because, one, it really is outside the purview of children, which at least from my perspective was one of the bigger concerns. Is I didn't want this next to a daycare, didn't want this next to a school, didn't want this in anybody's backyard where kids would be running around. It was important to at least have this type of business in an area where kids wouldn't be there. Because the fact of the matter is, because we are talking about drugs, there is a likelihood for crime. And because we're talking about cash, there is a likelihood for crime. And I wouldn't want anybody's child to be looking out the window of their daycare and see something like that happen. So we needed to at least put in those standards that would protect our children and our youths growing up in Northborough. And this area seemed to be the best suited area in terms of being able to get there. It's in an area that's well patrolled. It's in an area that's well lit and is relatively busy enough that it's going to serve as a deterrent to crime emanating from this type of business. I'd ask you to consider the safety aspects of this zoning bylaw. If we don't have a bylaw, then this type of a business could go anywhere, including downtown. And it's not just a question of, can we put a business in? This business has certain requirements that go along with it in terms of how the security is going to be set up, the amount of lighting that becomes necessary, and how the building is to be constructed, how people access the building, the hours of operation. It's not just like any other business. There's more to it in the state regulations. Allowing us to locate the business appropriately within the town eliminates a potential eyesore, it eliminates a potential crime problem, and it preserves the look and feel of our downtown as it is now. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes. John O'Mara, 491 Green Street. Basic question. What is the need here in Northborough for this facility? And I guess, what is the benefit to the town of Northborough by locating a facility in our neighborhood?
It's really confidential as to we're not aware of which residents of the town of Northborough have medical problems that would require medical marijuana as a treatment, and the town of Northborough will really not go out and recruit to bring one of these in. Independent owners of these will go to the state DPH and make a case for why they think Northborough would be a good place to site this. So it's really something that will happen to us, and the question is if in fact people proposing an RMD decide they'd like to locate one in Northborough, they find a landowner who's willing to sell them some property, and they feel it's a reasonable place to put one, and they go to the DPH, and the DPH says, sounds good to me, go for it, then they'll locate here in Northborough, and in the absence of zoning, they can purchase any industrial or commercial parcel in town, and as long as they're more than 500 feet away from a place which routinely children congregate, they can locate. So it's not so much the town looking at it as a benefit, it's just if in fact one of these things happens to us, do we want to put in some regulations that are somewhat more stringent than the state regulations, or do we not want to do that? And we've heard discussion on both sides of that. But as far as the benefit to Northborough, it doesn't really come down to whether the town gets a benefit or not. It's just a question about whether someday someone proposes to do something here and the State Department of Health agrees with them.
If it's counterproductive, why shouldn't we be resisting it?
Because the state says
As
towns are not
mandated?
allowed to prohibit them.
Ah, okay.
Once it was passed at the state level, the state was concerned that once it passed, all the towns would say, that sounds great, but not in my town, and effectively it would be meaningless. So when something like this happens, the state basically says that towns don't have the right to prohibit.
So this is another situation where we're being dictated to. In other words, this is not our town's choice, it's somebody else's.
Right, and so the question before us tonight is, the state has put some regulations in place as to how these could be located. The planning board has proposed a modification to that, and the town has to decide if it wants to just do what the state says or do something different that's being recommended
Got it,
tonight.
thanks.
Right over here, please.
Mary Jayswell, 59 Smith Road. It does seem, though, that by this article that we are saying not in our backyard, because it seems that this makes it next to impossible that if we do decide to have, or if somebody decides to bring this business to Northborough, that it would be very hard for it to fit into that, especially when we even talked about there's a potential that those borders could be expanded. Just being someone, I just recently went through cancer myself, and I'm one of those people that probably fall on that list of, but I was lucky enough to not need something like this, but I would hate that we are maybe restricting for people that would be unfortunate enough to be benefited by a dispensary like this local. I'm glad to say that I didn't need it, but I would hate that we're restricting this to people that would find benefit in this. And it seems that we're making this very restrictive to actually, preventing it from ever being in our neighborhood, so.
Well, no, this restricts it to a certain area of town, but there are parcels and there is room with this 300-foot setback to locate a facility in this zone.
Okay.
Right over here, please.
Leslie Harrison, 28 Moore Lane, and I am one of the members of the planning board that voted against this. An interesting part of our conversation was about the perception of fear, and I'm thrilled tonight to find out that at least amongst the people that are here, doesn't exist. So that was a large part of the conversation that occurred, was there's a perception of fear, and we want this to pass at town meeting, so we'll have it more restrictive to address those concerns about the boogeyman. And again, I'm thrilled to hear that that doesn't exist. So I think it's much ado about nothing. I think the whole idea about where children congregate is absurd. I attended a few of the state-held conversations about medical marijuana and said, what is the basis for even the restrictions, the distance from where children congregate? Why is this different than a CVS? Why is it different than a liquor store? And the response was, again, it's this perception of fear and trying to address those concerns. So I think that this is too restrictive. I honestly think that the state guidelines are too restrictive because of the 500-foot setback, but I at least am more supportive of that because it allows it in the regular business district as well. As far as the concerns about safety of the cash business, there are some movements underway to accept credit cards and to address that. I don't know where that stands, but I have heard conversations about that. And I also contend that the closer you are to the center of town, there are fewer safety issues. And I apologize for my voice. I'm not a great public speaker, but I think that it's actually safer in the center of town than it would be close to the police department, close to the fire station, close to the CVS, and than it would be off in the business district. So I urge you, I guess, I'm sorry to the planning board, but I urge you not to vote in favor of this.
Okay, this is our last comment.
James Lee, Lincoln Street. I look at this particular article and I see 4 pages of very Byzantine, complex language that's already, as was presented, pretty much covered by the state law. And I also am concerned about the cost to the town when we have regulations which differ from state law, bringing potential liability to the town. And having to have those additional legal costs. I'm also concerned that the town decided to change the state law from 500 feet to 300 feet. We have state law. It's probably okay. It was probably debated by people smarter than some of us here in town. And therefore, because it's so Byzantine and it's so likely to cause litigation in the town, I'm simply going to vote no, because I don't think we as a town have any purpose in doing this other than to create more misery for ourselves. So I'm voting no.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask for the recommendation from the planning board.
Okay, it's just been made pretty clear tonight. The planning board voted 3 in favor to support this, 1 against, and we had 1 member absent who didn't vote but gave his opinion tonight.
And may I also hear from the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee?
Mr. Moderator, the committee voted unanimously to support this article.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Before we vote, somehow I lost my voting card coming from my seat down here. Can I?
I'm sorry, you only get 1 issue, okay?
Can I vote without my voting card, or?
Someone keep an eye on him, please, okay?
The town planner
There we
just
go.
found
See?
my voting card. I don't know what I'd do without the town planner. Okay.
We're going to have to give you a 50-foot setback. This is what you're voting on for Article 38. I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, by adding paragraph G, 7G, to section 7-05-020, classification of uses, in chapter 7-05, use regulations, by adding a new entry for registered marijuana dispensary, to section 7-05-030, table 1, table of uses, part B, commercial and industrial districts, and by adding to chapter 7-10, special regulations, a new section, 7-10-070, registered marijuana dispensary, all as set forth in the warrant. Because this is a zoning bylaw, this is a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed? Tellers, come help me, please. We're going to do this vote and have the tellers count. When I ask you to raise your card, everyone can put their cards down right now. When I ask you to vote again, please raise your cards, hold them up until the tellers tell you to put them down. Are the tellers ready? Okay, thank you. Okay, everyone's ready? All those in favor, please raise your cards.
Eight. 18, 1-8.
23.
I had 23 and 37.
That's it? Okay, everyone can put their cards down. Those opposed, please raise your cards.
Six.
One, 18.
18. 32.
46, 46.
And 46.
Article 38 does not carry. Article 39.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, Chapter 710, special regulations by adding a new section, 71070, temporary moratorium on medical marijuana treatment centers, registered marijuana dispensaries as set forth in the warrant, with one exception, revise the date in subsection C from December 31st, 2014 to November 30th, 2014.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Presentation will be by Mr. Leaf.
The choice here now is, based on the discussion we had tonight, if this moratorium is passed, the planning board will go back, reconsider, decide if there's any changes that seem reasonable to make. If in fact the planning board wants to propose a different version of this, then a special town meeting would be called sometime before November 30th to propose a different version of this. So if you vote in favor of a moratorium, you're basically asking the planning board to come back with a different version of this. If your feeling is that the state regulations are sufficient and that there should be no zoning regulation proposed by the town just to go with the state regulation, then you'd vote against the moratorium. If the moratorium is defeated, then basically there'll be no specific zoning in Northborough for the RMDs, and whatever the state regulation prescribes will be what will happen if, in fact, an RMD is proposed to the town of Northborough. So voting for the moratorium means planning board, go back, do some more homework, present us something else. Voting against the moratorium says the state regulations are fine, don't do anything, we'll live with whatever the state says. So those are the decisions to be made tonight, whether voting for or against this.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, discussion? Once, twice, she made it. Your name, please?
Janet Robbins, 44 Brigham. I just like I'm sorry it didn't pass. I like the verbiage of it being in a business district and not mixed use. So I felt a little bit safe about that. So when you go back and look at the plan, I hope you will keep Brigham Street in mind. We're still in business east, though.
Yes.
Leslie Harrison, 28 Moore Lane, Planning Board again. Just a reminder that if we do go with the moratorium, it will require a special town meeting, and just consider the additional costs, the balance, the cost of that versus going with the regulations. It doesn't preclude the Planning Board from still going back to the drawing board and coming back with another proposal at next town meeting. The reality is there won't be an RMD between now and then anyway because of the time cycle, so just something to consider.
Charlie Cleary, Juniper Brook Road. Does anybody know what the cost would be of a special town meeting if this passes?
Mr. Kader?
We have done estimates in the past. It's anywhere between $5,000 and $8,000, depending on the venue and the materials needed.
I'd like to recommend that you vote this down so we don't spend another $10,000. Thank you.
I see there are no other questions or comments. So at this time, I'd like to ask for a recommendation from the Planning Board on Article 39.
It's interesting, the planning board did not take a vote on how to proceed on this article. So I'd say the planning board did not vote on this. I'll just make a comment as Rick Leaf, resident from 30 Wiles Farm Road, that based on the comments I heard tonight, I don't think it'd be productive for the planning board to go back and produce anything else. I think the sentiment of the audience was that the state regulations are fine. So at least my personal recommendation would be to vote against the moratorium.
And may I hear from Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee, please?
We had considerable discussion on this issue. It was our feeling that a moratorium would be good at this time. It isn't as though there would not be other places that would be available to those who were in need. We've said Worcester. For most of us, when we go to do any kind of medical attention, we go to Worcester. So it's not that the people would not have access to the medical marijuana. So the committee voted in favor.
Thank you. This is what you're voting on for Article 39. I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, Chapter 7-10, special regulations, by adding a new section, Section 7-10-070, temporary moratorium on medical marijuana treatment centers / registered marijuana dispensaries, as set forth in the warrant, with one exception. Revise the date in subsection C from December 31, 2014 to November 30, 2014. Once again, this is a zoning bylaw, so we'll require a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Those opposed? Article 39 does not pass. Article 40, zoning bylaw. Rick Leaf, Chair of the Planning Board.
I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, by adding to Chapter 705 use regulations, Section 705-020 classification of uses, subsection I, industrial uses, the text set forth in the warrant, and renumbering the existing clauses 5 and 6 of subsection I as 6 and 7 by adding a new entry for large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation to Section 705-030, Table 1, Table of Uses, Part B, commercial and industrial districts as set forth in the warrant, and by adding to Chapter 710 special requirements a new Section 71060, large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation as set forth in the warrant.
Second. Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Leaf will make the presentation.
Too much paperwork. Okay. So now we're going to talk about large-scale solar arrays and zoning that the planning board proposes that we adopt for the management of large-scale solar arrays. Just by definition, I've twice said this tonight. I'm going to say it one more time, and then for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about things like solar arrays and solar installations, but these are officially called large-scale, ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations. That's the last time I'm going to say that tonight, but whenever I say solar array or solar installation, that's what I mean. Basically, it's something that's installed on the ground, not installed on an existing or planned structure's roof, and has a rated nameplate capacity of at least 250 kilowatts DC. So that's what these large things are. We're going to be talking about these large solar farms where you see the ground-mounted panels. You've probably seen some in Westborough along on Milk Street leading to the center of town and other places. We're going to be talking about regulation for that in the town of Northborough. Basically, the Mass Department of Energy Resources has been promoting alternative energy sources, and solar is one of the ones the state is actively promoting. As with RMDs, the state zoning provisions say that towns cannot effectively prohibit these large-scale solar arrays, but they do have the ability to do some regulation over their placement. The state did develop a model zoning bylaw, and that was something that we took as a guide for the zoning that we're proposing here in Northborough. A lot of other towns did the same thing. And we need to be clear here that this bylaw has nothing to do with regulating small residential home-based systems. So if you're interested in putting some solar panels on your roof or a small solar installation in your yard, that none of that falls under the purview of this regulation. That's all allowable on an individual basis. If building permits are required for the work that's necessary to do these installations, and the normal pulling of building permits and regulation by the building department be required. But there's nothing in what we're talking about tonight that has anything to do with small residential installations. These are larger commercial installations. As you remember, we implemented a temporary moratorium on these at a special town meeting in October, and that was timed to end on May 1st, 2014, so the planning board would have time to develop regulations and bring them to town meeting this year. So that moratorium that we adopted will end as of Thursday. As I said, the planning board reviewed the model bylaw. We looked at some bylaws adopted successfully by other towns, and we got some good input from Dick Jones, who lives in town. He's a serious background in electrical engineering. He was a member of our wind committee, and he helped us quite a bit in terms of proposing some of the verbiage here, things that would make sense in our proposal. And we thank Dick very much for his input and help on this proposal. What we've done is developed a new section of the zoning regarding large-scale solar arrays, and we've modified the table of uses to place them where we think they belong in town. Any one of these things that proposed to town will require a site plan approval by the planning board, and we've added, once again with the help of Dick, a lot of other special technical requirements in that site plan review that are appropriate for these large-scale solar arrays. These include things for signage and security. We also include provisions where the proponent would need to work with the town police and fire department to do training, set up safety procedures and ways to respond if there are any problems at these installations. What we're proposing is that we allow these in our industrial zones. We prohibit them in our residential zones. We prohibit them in our business zones. That if in fact these are located in an industrial zone where they're abutted by other industrial zones or commercial zones or uses, that we use our standard setbacks of 40 feet in the front, 20 feet in the side, and 25 feet in the rear. But if in fact one of these is proposed in an industrial zone that abuts a residential zone, that piece of property abuts either a residential zone or a residential use in the industrial zone, that would require a 100-foot setback around the entire perimeter of the installation. And a little bit later in the proposal, we'll talk about some landscaping provisions that we're going to propose to remove the ability to actually have any site view of these from a residential neighborhood. So we'll use the current setbacks if in fact it's located in an industrial zone and is surrounded by industrial commercial uses, but an increased setback if it borders on any residential zone or residential use. This map shows where our industrial zones are in town. So basically, this is the north side of town. This is the industrial zone that goes down where Whitney Street connects down into Berlin. We have an industrial zone there. We have another industrial zone off of Route 290 where Barefoot Road comes up in here and connects up to Whitney Street. We have on the southeast side of town, past the high school, down Bartlett Street and Lyman Street, we have a large industrial zone here. And then we have a smaller industrial zone in the southwest portion of town. This is where the Northborough Crossing is, where Avalon is, over here on the other side of Route 20 where the new baseball facility is proposed. So these are our three industrial zones, and the zoning prescribes that if in fact one of these large-scale solar arrays was proposed in Northborough, it could only go in one of these three zones. Could not go anyplace else in town. Just looking a little bit at each zone, once again, this is the north side of town. This is the one down Whitney Street. Everything in yellow are parcels that abut either residential uses or residential property. So if anything was developed in this part of the industrial zone, there need to be the 100-foot setback on all sides. Same thing here. This is the part of the industrial zone off of Barefoot Road that abuts residential districts or residential uses, and anything in these particular areas would once again need to conform to the 100-foot setback. Anything in light blue are parcels that are completely surrounded by either abutting industrial parcels, and so these would conform to the regular setbacks. Anything in yellow, though, would conform to the 100-foot setback. This is over on the southeast part of town, down by Bartlett Street. Once again, you can see that everything in yellow is kind of the part of the industrial zone that's abutting some of the residential uses in here. Everything in the light blue are parcels that are completely surrounded by other abutting industrial uses. So the things in light blue, once again, would conform to the normal industrial setbacks, and the things in yellow, parcels in yellow, would conform to the 100-foot setback. And this is the southwest part of town. This area here is the Northborough crossing. This is Avalon. This is the area down here where the baseball facility is being developed. Once again, you can see anything in yellow would conform to the 100-foot setback, and in light blue, the normal industrial setbacks. Where did it go? Excuse me for a second. We talked about briefly in this 100-foot setback. In fact, in all the setbacks, whether they abut residential or not, we're proposing that half of the setback be vegetated in a manner that provides site impervious view. So in the residential areas here, if it's an abutting residential zone, we've got a 100-foot setback. That means 50 feet of that 100 feet basically have to be landscaped with a site impervious evergreen plantings of at least 8 feet in height, or a combination of plantings and impervious fence. The idea here is to set one of these back in industrial zone that abuts residential, so there'd be the 100-foot setback, and then half of that setback would be landscaped in a manner where it wouldn't be possible to see the panels or the site from the abutting residential zones. So this, once again, the second bullet is something particular for abutting residential. So our feeling is, by limiting these to industrial zones, by putting in special setbacks for abutting residential uses in residential districts, and providing more significant landscaping, we think that the development of alternative energy and solar is a good thing, that if in fact someone wanted to do this in the town of Northborough, we would have adequate provisions in industrial zones to do it, and we feel with the setbacks we're proposing and the landscaping we're proposing, we could adequately protect abutting residential uses if that came to that. So we'd ask for your approval of this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion, debate from the floor?
Yeah, my name's Lynn Carmody. I'm from Green Street. I'm also an active board member for the Algonquin Regional High School Turf and Track Project, and I'll have to say that one of the viable alternatives that we're actually looking at to help fund this project is this type of solar panel. And some of the viable areas that we're looking at are within the residential areas. So while I do agree with the setback, the visibility and whatnot, I think we're limiting our income potential and what we can bring to the town by limiting it to the industrial areas. Thank you.
Yes, sir, over here.
Peter Utschneider, 243 West Street. I have a couple questions. You had mentioned earlier that I believe the part of the definition is 250 kilowatts. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is roughly the surface area that would cover? So, and where my question is going is, I'm fortunate enough to have just under 5 acres in Northborough, yes, in a largely wooded lot. Is that the size of a half of a tennis court or a tennis court, which would easily fit on my lot? And if that is the case, that I would not be able to do that on my property, that's somewhat of a restriction.
Once again, if we only talk about industrial property, so if you're talking about doing something of this scale on residential property, the zoning would not allow that. So this is only allowed in industrial zones.
If this were to pass, then
If
that
this-
would be a restriction on my property to do that, correct?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, so
You could do small-scale solar, but if you wanted to do an installation of greater than 250 kilowatts, ground-mounted solar at that size, that would not be allowed in a residential district if this zoning passes.
currently, are there any restrictions in the state of Massachusetts that would restrict me as a private property owner to put that scale on my own property?
There's nothing from a state level to do that. Other towns have passed their own zoning, and it's typical in other towns that we looked at to limit these solar things to either industrial or commercial zones. We didn't see any other town zoning that had gone through that allowed these types of installations in residential districts.
So I'm assuming we already have some kind of setbacks in place which would apply to this as a structure on my property. So as long as those setbacks were abided by and I went with the proper planning permission, then otherwise I should be able to do this on my property unless this passes.
I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Rick Aronovitz, Brewer Street. This is just another example of the one law we can be sure of is the law of unintended consequences. And we keep seeming to shoot ourselves in the foot and take away our liberties. The preceding speaker right now has the right to put a solar array on his property. If this passes, he probably won't be able to do it. It says in the purpose of this law is to allow the creation of new large-scale. Well, this isn't going to allow the creation, it's going to prevent the creation. I was looking into putting a solar array on a building I own in another town, and it's marginally economic at best. It's, the profitability is so thin, it's almost not worth doing in the first place. And most of the people who do it are doing it because they're environmentalists and want to contribute to a green planet. Well, I ran up against these same kind of regulations. Oh, we want you to do a site plan review. That'll be $10,000 to get it stamped by an engineer. Oh, we want you to have a bond to make sure it gets taken off the roof when you're done with it 20 years from now. Oh, we want you to have insurance. Oh, we want you to have all these other things. And by the time I got through with that, I threw up my hands and said, this isn't worth doing. And that's exactly what we're doing to people who want to develop these kinds of solar panel farms. And when you think about it, with that kind of a setback, what you're doing is you're keeping people from putting up small arrays, because if you have a small lot and you have to have a 100-foot setback because you're near residential, you might use up most of your lot. Or what you're going to do is you're going to take somebody who is going to put in a big one and make them put in 249 kilowatts worth to stay below the law. And I think that's a pretty arbitrary figure. I don't know where that came from. And it's kind of stupid anyway, because if solar panels get more efficient, even a small array might be 250 kilowatts. So I think this is an ill-conceived motion. I think when we diminish somebody else's freedoms, you diminish your own. And there's absolutely no reason for this. Thank you.
Just like to respond to that comment. Once again, typical residential solar installations are much less than 250 kilowatts, and there are no restrictions or provisions in this zoning to restrict anybody's ability to do a residential system on their own property, except, as I said before, the need to pull whatever necessary building permits there. 250 kilowatts was the guideline the state provided as to what they consider to be a large-scale system, and people who are doing these kinds of systems are used to going through site plan reviews, paying the normal fees to do that. But once again, this would not restrict anyone from doing a small residential system on their property. No site plan review required, nothing needed to be done except the normal, review with the building department.
Right over here, please.
48 Moore Lane, Barbara Jarkin. I have a question for Chairman Leaf. Regarding the, I'm very pleased that there has been such good work done to protect residential properties, and I think that there are a lot of drawbacks on solar voltaic facilities based on the fact that there are questions as to whether or not fires can be fought there, you can't use water. There are a lot of drawbacks. These are dangerous industrial projects if not located in areas where they belong, like industrial or perhaps maybe even business. My question is this: since there was a project on Newton Street proposed, I believe it's a 9-megawatt wind solar project, and that did not pass, would this project on Newton Street be grandfathered if 40 passes?
Direct that to the planner. The answer is yes, that would be grandfathered.
I have a point that I'd like to make with respect to that in a question. Was that plan presented to the town, stamped by a registered engineer?
The answer is yes, it was.
So we have a copy of the plan on file that's stamped by a registered engineer for Newton Street, Ziad Ramadan's plan?
Yes, all Mr. Ramadan did was submit an approval not required plan, which locks in his uses on that particular property, barring any zoning change. So he did submit an A&R several years ago, and so that use is protected for his property. He has since spoken with the planning board and with several staff members that he has no intention of developing his residential property as a solar farm. What he's going to be doing is proposing additional residential development.
Thank you very much.
Right over here, please.
My name is Rick Hagan, Laurel Avenue. I do own a solar photovoltaic system for my house. It's on my roof. It covers my entire roof. It's a 12.4 kilowatt system, which just to answer the question over here, that's 20 foot by 40 foot. So a 250 kilowatt system is about 20 times that. So you're talking 160 by 100 foot, more or less, surface area to get that amount of solar photovoltaic. Some of the worries here, I'd like to just kind of counterbalance a little bit here. Think about the power substation that you have at the corner of Allen Street and Hudson Street. That's a very significant power system setup there where you have potential real issues with kid wandering in there and having some issue. These systems are no worse. In fact, maybe even not as bad as some of those sorts of things. You take a look at the actual visibility type issues. These things I'm not as worried about. I have to tell you, people will come to my house, walk into my house, talk to me, and then they're stunned when I tell them, oh yeah, I just noticed the photovoltaic system on top of the roof. People don't notice it. It's just not as particularly visible as people tend to worry about. So I'm not terribly worried about these things. I'm going to end up voting for this because I think it's a reasonable compromise. But I kind of wanted to counterbalance some of the arguments and discussion about these systems. They're really not that bad. The system that we're talking about here has got to be a very large system before it can even show up. And from what I understand, if it's going to go on a roof, even then it doesn't necessarily apply. So this feels like a very reasonable compromise to me.
Right over here, please.
Hi, I'm Mike Long from Church Street. The size of the array, according to the gentleman over there, seems like it could fit in about a half acre of land. So by putting this into place, you are removing the rights of somebody to put something like this, if they have the property, to do so. So I'm looking at this more of a property rights, and to the other point, I'm not a big proponent of solar energy, but if somebody wants to supplement their power, all the more power to them. So in that regards, I guess I'd have to say I'm voting against this. Thank you.
Once again, in response to that comment,
Sure.
anyone that wants to propose power for their own residence will install a system much less than this. Once you start talking about a system like this, you're talking about hooking up on the grid, providing power outside your own property. This is definitely a commercial or industrial use, so this is not going to prevent people from installing solar on their property to power their own property.
But it would prevent me from selling power back to the grid to help supplement my utility bills.
Right, so
or the house running of my household.
Right, it would prevent you from doing more of a commercial kind of use on your residential property.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Larry Hogan, 7 Colby Street. Question on the zoning. In other business zones, would it be possible for the Zoning Board of Appeals to cite anything? Or is it now an out prohibition for everything except industrial?
In the town of Northborough, use variances are allowed. So in fact, if a proponent came before the zoning board and made a case for why they wanted to site one of these someplace other than industrial zone, the zoning board would have the ability to grant that variance.
Because I noticed on the map, the Old Town landfill is just outside the southwest industrial zone. It's about 6 acres. It's on a list the DP has of landfills that could potentially be developed into solar arrays. It's unused. I assume it's still owned by the town. You know, and that could be a benefit economically to the town if that were to happen. You know, there's various companies that can do it for you on a lease buyback, or the town could do it. But right now, that's excluded from the process. So could that be developed then, or could the town do it?
Well, no, no one could do it. We can't, unfortunately, we can't zone lot by lot. We have to zone district by district.
Well, I'm at the property, so that I don't know what that's zoned currently. You know, so could that be done through zoning board of appeals process?
Yes,
or?
it could be.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Right up here.
Ellen Church, 339 Crawford Street. I just think we're going to be the laughing stock of everyone if we zone solar arrays as more restricted than marijuana facilities. So just consider that. Thank you.
Right over here.
Thank you. Peter Schneider, 243 West Street again. So my question before is not just a hypothetical, it's actually a practical one for me. So our house doesn't have any oil heat, any gas heat. Our house is completely run in an environmental fashion. We have electric heat pumps, passive solar, and 2 very large wood stoves that we use, and we circulate air. It was a long winter and a lot of wood. So for us, the pitch of my roof is actually not south-facing, although we do get a lot of south exposure to the sun. So a ground-based array would actually be the only alternative for me to put on my property.
And as long as it's less than 250 kilowatts, it'd be allowable.
Right. So I've worked in technology for the last 22 years. We've all seen a floppy disk go to a CD, go to a drive, go to the cloud. Things do get smaller and get more productive. So what we see today as a limit, which we're looking at something, and I think we're kind of now at around the size of a tennis court, we're saying, I guarantee in 10 years' time will be the size of, 50 by 50 or something. So we're going to write something into a bylaw in the town, which we know more or less technology will make, or change in the future. So again, I appeal to my fellow town members to consider this as another restriction against property right owners, and I will be voting no against this. Thank you.
Once again, in response to that, there's nothing to say this zoning stays in place forever. If in fact that technology changes that way, and 250 kilowatt systems are now very small and very unobtrusive and very safe, there's nothing to say the zoning can't be changed to increase that limit to some other kind of system and allow larger, smaller systems to be employed. So anything we pass tonight is not forever. Certainly things can change over time.
The lady right over here, please.
Leslie Harrison, 28 Moore Lane, Planning Board. I am in support of this article. One thing I do want to mention is the future is here. The next version of the model bylaw is doing it based upon land area instead of by power for just that reason. So as Rick said, this will be an evolutionary process for us. I urge you to vote in favor of it tonight, and the Planning Board will take it upon itself to look at the next version of the model bylaw and make changes accordingly.
If I could have the next 3 quick comments, and then we can move forward.
Mark Tessier, 35 Colburn Street. I've worked in the electric utility business now for over 30 years, and I've interconnected a lot of these things, all kinds of things. I see some technical problems with this proposal you're putting forward. The first one will be happy for people who are looking to avoid it. That's you've listed the nameplate capacity in kilowatts of direct current. There's a lot of suppliers of these who will supply not only the photovoltaics, but they'll supply the inverter as well, which is what you need to hook up with utility, and they rate theirs in kilowatts and AC current. So that means if you have some of these rated in AC current, this bylaw would not apply if it's passed. The second thing is you have a pile of technical information you're requesting in here that is a duplicate of what the utility asked for. I just hate to see duplicate of information because it means duplicate of work as well. And I also question whether the board or anyone in the town would know what to do with a lot of the information they're getting. I don't see a lot of people up here qualified to use it. And that gets us into some federal regulations. We have some current federal regulations right now that have to do with information on electric utilities. And basically, information is only supposed to be provided on the electric utility to people who know how to use it and know what it's used for. It's a confidentiality thing. You don't have anything in here to address that. So for these reasons, I'm going to suggest a no vote on this.
Over here, please.
Mike Powell, 360 Whitney Street. Two questions for clarification. One, someone made the statement that they would be unable to sell power back to the grid from their home system because of this bylaw. I don't think that's true as long as they're under 250 kilowatts, correct?
That's correct.
And the second is that the regulation seems to focus on the visual impact of the solar array itself, particularly if someone were to do this in a residential district, if this did not pass. What are the issues with the grid infrastructure that would be required? 250 kilowatts is over 100 houses worth of electricity. You're not just going to hook this up to the pole that's running up your residential street right now. What kind of transmission lines would be involved? What would the impact of that be? What are we talking about in terms of building there or town control over it?
Perhaps I could answer that if you'd like me to, having worked in the utility.
I just want to say that there's a lot of text in the body of the zoning, and some of that text gets into some of those details. For the purpose of the article tonight, the main purpose I was trying to get across was the fact of which zones in town we wanted to allow these facilities to be located, and some general setbacks and landscaping provisions. There's a lot of other detail in the zoning as well as state regulation.
Chief?
I don't know whether any of my neighbors are here tonight, my abutters. I just want them to know that if this article doesn't pass, that my wife and I are talking about putting a large solar display in our yard and also applying for a marijuana distribution permit.
Okay, with that being said, what I'm going to do now is ask for recommendation from the planning board, please, on Article 40.
The planning board voted 4 to 0 with one member absent to support this article.
And may I hear from Muni Code and Bylaw, please?
The committee voted unanimously to support this article.
Thank you. This is what you're voting on for Article 40. I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, by adding to Chapter 7-05, Use Regulations, Section 7-05-020, Classifications of Uses, Subsection I, Industrial Uses, the text set forth in the warrant, and renumbering the existing clauses 5 and 6 of subsection I as 6 and 7 by adding a new entry for large-scale ground-mounted solar voltaic installation to Section 7-05-030, Table 1. Table of Uses, Part B, Commercial and Industrial Districts as set forth in the warrant, and by adding to Chapter 7-10, Special Regulations, a new Section 7-10-060, Large-Scale Ground-Mounted Solar Voltaic Installations, as set forth in the warrant. Again, as a zoning bylaw, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed, tellers, please. Everyone take your cards down. We'll do it again. Are we ready? All those in favor, please raise your cards and keep them up until the tellers ask you to lower them.
10.
Twenty.
20. 24. 47.
So we've counted all those? Okay, all the cards down, please. Those opposed, please raise your cards.
Three. 27. 14. And 28.
Article 40 does not pass. The vote was 101 yes, 72 no. Article 41, zoning bylaw signs.
I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town. This is Article 41 we're on?
That's correct.
Oh, excuse me. I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, Section 709-040, signs by deleting the text shown in strike-through and adding the text shown as underlined as set forth in the warrant.
You have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Presentation by Mr. Leaf.
Okay, the purpose of this zoning change is to talk about smaller temporary signs in town. As we've taken a look at what's been going on in the town of Northborough the past few years, we've noticed that there's a lot of use of smaller temporary signs of different types and styles. As the business and technology have changed, so have the types of signs. We've noticed that there's been quite a proliferation of small temporary signs along main roads in town. That's tended to detract from the appearance of the town. We've also noticed there's been a number of signs that flash messages and especially stream messages, which is also distracting and detracts from the appearance of the town. We've also talked in our meetings to business owners, and we have many smaller businesses that are not in clear view from the main roads or sit back in some of the more strip mall type of environments we have on some of the main streets. These business owners need ways to advertise sales and special events. Typically, print and television, radio advertising is very expensive, and they found that by putting out small signs for temporary periods of time, they can advertise effectively. And real estate sales are aided by open houses, and typically open houses need signs up to advertise the fact there's an open house going on a particular part of property. So we have, on the one side, a proliferation of signs, an impact on the appearance of the town. On the other hand, we have some valid needs of business owners, especially smaller business owners and realtors, to advertise and to help move the economy along in the town. So basically, we need to try to figure out how to balance these two competing needs so that we can allow reasonable advertising to continue and still manage the appearance of the town, especially along Main Street and Route 20 and some of our other main roads. So after a meeting with business owners, with concerned citizens, in discussions we had with the selectmen who also fielded a lot of comments about this issue in town, we're proposing the following actions that we feel are a good compromise between these competing requirements. First of all, in Section D, the basic requirements section, we want to add a provision prohibiting streaming of messages. So these are electronic boards where things just keep flying across the board, continually changing text or pictures or graphics or something like that. So the streaming of messages in electronic format, if this zoning is adopted, those types of signs would be prohibited. Changeable text, though, in other words, putting some text up and it changing on a every so often basis, whether that's a sign where the text may change every minute or two, or a sign where there's actually non-electronic messages, letters or text that's changed once a day or once a week or something like that, that kind of changeable text, which is different than streaming text, would be allowed. In sections G and H, we're going to add a feature in our business districts and industrial districts where we tend to have a lot of large permanent signs out on the boundaries of the property, that a section of that sign can be used for changeable text. So for example, take the plaza down on the west side of town where Rocky's Hardware is. There are a lot of smaller businesses away from the street, but there's a fairly large sign up in the front. Then in this new zoning, you'd have the ability, either on an existing sign or a new sign, to create a section where you could do changeable text, and the different tenants in these large developments could work with the landlord that at certain times during the year, if they're having a special event or a sale, they could post out by the road on the permanent sign some text for a period of time that would advertise their event. Then that could come down when that event's over, and some other tenant in that area could use that. So it's a way of taking permanent signs that we have, which are located near the roads and are visible, and allowing a capability to add some changeable text on permanent signs. In section G3, we'd like to increase the number of days that a temporary sign can be displayed from 45 to 56. The 45 days right now is during the course of a year. If you want to put out a temporary sign, you need a permit from the building inspector. You're allowed to have temporary signs up for no more than 45 days in any one calendar year. We'd like to increase that to 56. That would make basically 2 months, 8 weeks. During the course of a year, you could have a sign up. In talking to some of the business owners, they felt that that would be appropriate amount of time for handling any seasonal type of advertising they wanted to do. So we're proposing changing the number of allowable days from 45 to 56. We're also adding a provision that if in fact in an exceptional case a business owner needs a temporary sign for more than 56 days, they can go before the Board of Selectmen and ask for an extension. And if the Board of Selectmen feels it's warranted, the Board of Selectmen would be able to grant an extension in exceptional cases to allow a temporary sign for a particular business owner to be up more than 56 days in a calendar year. The provision right now also states in the zoning that signs, temporary signs, have to be located on the property where the business is located, but our feeling is there could be some situations where there could be a piece of private property closer to the road that if the business owner could arrange something with the private property owner to allow a sign to be up in a temporary nature on a piece of private property, and once again got agreement from the Board of Selectmen that a sign could be located on private property with the agreement of the private property owner and the Board of Selectmen. This would also be a way to allow a sign to become more visible for a short period of time. But we're going to maintain the current provision in the zoning that signs, these temporary signs, are not allowed on rights-of-way or public property. We think with the provisions we're adding, we're giving some additional abilities to the business owner and also clarifying for the building inspector what's allowed and what's not allowed, and we'd continue to prohibit the putting up of these temporary signs on public property, and the building inspector would be allowed to remove them if they were there. We also have 2 sections of the current zoning that talk about types of signs that don't require a permit. We've combined those together into one section. We've taken sections K and L and turned that into one section called Section K for signs not requiring a permit. In the real estate section of K, we've added a provision that any real estate for sale signs or for rent signs need to be removed within 1 week of the completion of sale or the filling of the rental. And we've added a section K3 specifically around real estate open house signs that say these signs are allowed, but they can only be erected on the day of the open house, and they need to be taken down when the open house completes. So our feeling is with these changes, we've tried to strike a compromise between trying to manage the amount and proliferation of the signs and give some additional abilities to business owners to display their advertising when they need to do it, and also give the selectmen a little bit of an ability that if there are some exceptional circumstances to grant some extensions or variance to these things. And we'd ask for your approval of these changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Any discussion, any debate on Article 41?
Marie Neva, 62 Whitney Street. One quick question. If is the construction being done on your personal property, private property owner, and they want to put up a sign while they're working there, but their business is someplace else, is that allowable?
My sense is that would be allowed. That sign would be you, the property owner, and you would give permission for that person to put a sign up that this particular contractor is working on your property
Yeah, while they're working there,
while they're working on your property.
without permission of the selectmen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Lynn Carmody, Green Street. I am a board member for the youth football in town here in Northborough, Southborough, and regularly during the period of registration, we get permission throughout the schools and on recreation fields to hang signs. Some of them are quite large. Are they impacted by this at all?
Right. So a nonprofit organization like youth football would not be impacted by this.
Thank you.
And over here, please.
A couple of different questions. I'll start with the simple one. So what about political signs on private property?
Right, that's not covered by this bylaw, so that would be allowable.
Okay, and then the maybe more controversial one, which is if you go down Main Street today and you're getting close to CVS coming from this direction, you're first assaulted by the colorful animated sign that was recently constructed by the railroad tracks, and then you're assaulted by the blinking signs on the lovely old building right next to CVS. Under this provision, will we be able to stop looking like Las Vegas when we're in downtown Northborough?
I guess there's two answers to that question. Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, the blinking sign is prohibited, and the larger sign whose text changes occasionally, does not stream, would be allowed.
John Forrigan, 99 Pleasant Street. I own a sign company. And first of all, I would like to say thank you very much to the planning board for inviting me in to help. They spent a lot of time going over the thoughts of businesses and residents. The time that they put into this and the way that they worked with me was to be commendable. I liked what they did. They gave a lot of thought to increasingly helping the businesses survive in this town with the thought of the residents. One of the purposes of increasing the signs that they are increasing is to try to reduce the Las Vegas look. And I think that the article should be passed just for the fact that it has taken a lot of time to take into, again, the consideration of all that was done. And I would like to thank them for the opportunity to help.
Seeing there are no further questions or debate, may I have the recommendations from the Planning Board on Article 41?
The planning board voted 4-0 with one member absent to support this article.
And may I hear from the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee, please?
The committee voted unanimously to support this article, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. So this is what you're voting on for Article 41. I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, Section 7-09-040, signs, by deleting the text shown in strike-through and adding the text shown as underlined, as set forth in the warrant. Again, this is a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed? I declare that Article 41 passes by a 2/3 vote.
Thank you.
Article 42, zoning bylaw floodplain overlay district.
I
Mr.
move the
Lee.
town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, Chapter 704 zoning districts, Section 704-030 floodplain overlay district boundaries A, by deleting the text shown in strike-through and adding the text shown as underlined as set forth in the warrant.
Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Leaf, your presentation.
Town engineer Fred Letfield is going to make the presentation.
Good evening. This article provides an updated flood insurance study report and an updated set of flood insurance rate maps. The current maps are dated July 4th, 2011, and were adopted at the 2011 annual town meeting, and at the time, no significant changes were made to the flood hazard data. And the previous flood zone maps were dated 1979. The previous maps, the flood limits from the previous maps were digitized and updated onto a newer image of the town of Northborough at that time. The updated maps that are being provided, these updated maps are being provided to the town by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The updated maps are a result of a revised flood study, and some changes have been made to the limits of the floodplain. The new maps will become effective on July 16th of 2014 and will assure all property owners within the town of Northborough that fall within these flood zones will have the ability to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Are there any questions, any debate on Article 42? Hearing none, may I have the recommendations from the Planning Board, please?
The planning board voted 4-0 with one member absent to support this article.
Thank you. And Municipal Code and Bylaw, please?
The committee voted unanimously to support this article.
Thank you. This is what you're voting on for Article 42. I move the town vote to amend Part 7 of the Northborough Town Code, the Northborough zoning bylaw, Chapter 7-04 zoning districts, Section 7-04-030 floodplain overlay district boundaries. A, by deleting the text shown in strike-through and adding the text shown as underlined, as set forth in the warrant. Again, this is a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed? I declare that Article 42 has passed by a 2/3 vote. Article 43, please. Chairman Rutan.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to pass over this article.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. DPW Director, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yeah, I recommend passing over this article due to outstanding unresolved issues.
My wife tells me I have some outstanding unresolved issues.
No comment.
Thank you. With that being said, why don't we just have a vote on that then, because there's been a motion to pass over. All those in favor of passing over Article 43? And those opposed? The motion to pass over Article 43 passes.
Thank you.
Street acceptances. Selectman Hutchins.
I move the town vote to accept the layouts as public ways of Cyrus Way, Weber Lane, and a portion of Johnson Avenue, as shown on the plans entitled Acceptance Plan of Cyrus Way in Northborough, Massachusetts, dated December 17, 2013, prepared by R.W. Hart Associates, Inc., Northborough, Massachusetts. Acceptance Plan of Weber Lane in Northborough, Massachusetts, dated December 19, 2013, prepared by David E. Ross Associates, Inc., Northborough, Massachusetts. and acceptance plan of the extension of Johnson Avenue in Northborough, Massachusetts, dated December 26, 2013, prepared by Thompson Liston Associates, Inc., Northborough, Massachusetts, copies of which are on file in the office of the town clerk, and to place these streets on the official town map as public ways, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept or take by eminent domain deeds or easements for such public ways.
Our motion has been made and seconded, and the presentation will be done by our town engineer, Fred Litchfield.
Thank you. Cyrus Way, Weber Lane, and this portion of Johnson Ave have been constructed in accordance with the subdivision approval process. Cyrus Way was approved by the Planning Board on November 17th in 2009, and access to this 7-lot residential subdivision is obtained from Shady Lane Avenue, which is off of Pine Haven Drive. Weber Lane was approved by the Planning Board on July 11th, 2011, and access to this 7-lot residential subdivision is obtained from Sturtbrook Lane, which is off of Bartlett Street. The portion of Johnson Ave that is being asked to be accepted tonight was approved by the Planning Board on March 7th, 2012, and access to this 2-lot subdivision is at the end of the existing Johnson Ave, which is off of Maple Street. Each of these streets are ready for acceptance as town roads and have been approved by the Planning Board.
Thank you. Any questions, any discussion on Article 44? Hearing none, may I have a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen, please?
The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support Article 44.
Thank you. This is what you're voting for in Article 44. I move the town vote to accept the layouts as public ways of Cyrus Way, Weber Lane, and a portion of Johnson Avenue as shown on the plans entitled Acceptance Plan of Cyrus Way in Northborough, Massachusetts, dated December 17, 2013, prepared by R.W. Hart Associates, Inc., Northborough, Massachusetts. Acceptance Plan of Weber Lane in Northborough, Massachusetts, dated December 19, 2013, prepared by David E. Ross Associates, Inc., Northborough, Massachusetts. And acceptance plan of the extension of Johnson Avenue in Northborough, Massachusetts, dated December 26, 2013, prepared by the Thompson Liston Associates, Northborough, Massachusetts, copies of which are on file at the office of the town clerk, and to place these streets on the official town map as public ways, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept or take by eminent domain deeds or easements for such public ways. This is a majority vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed. Article 44 passes. Article 45.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
I move the town vote to accept a sidewalk easement and such related easements, interests, and rights of access as determined necessary by the Board of Selectmen from Sheridan Road Realty Corporation in and about a portion of the property located at or near 1 Country Candle Lane, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to execute all documents and take all actions necessary in connection therewith.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Litchfield.
Thank you. This sidewalk easement is being provided by the developer of the Lawrence Falls condominium project in accordance with their approval from the Planning Board, which was granted on May 12, 2003. The developer was required to construct approximately 560 linear feet of sidewalk along their frontage on Whitney Street. The new sidewalk connects 2 existing portions of sidewalk on Whitney Street, previously separated by Howard Brook. Pedestrians no longer need to walk in Whitney Street, thus creating a much safer situation for both motorists and pedestrians.
Thank you. Any questions? Any discussion on Article 45? Yes.
Yes, my name is Norm Corbin, and I'm at 35 Whitney Street. I'm right across from the sidewalk. And I was wondering, first of all, the bridge is certainly fantastic for all the people who walk the street, but who maintains the landscaping around the sidewalk? The weeds generally in the summertime are anywhere from 3 to 5 feet tall, especially around the new bridge, which is kind of unsightly.
The landscaping that falls behind the sidewalk that was
No,
built by the
I'm looking at
developer?
the landscaping between the road and the sidewalk.
Between the traveled portion of the roadway and the sidewalk?
Yes.
Will be maintained by the town as part of this easement because that's the portion that we're accepting.
So who should I call when it gets a little wild?
You can call me.
Thanks, Fred.
Any other questions, discussions on Article 45? Hearing none, may I have a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen, please?
The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support Article 45.
Thank you. This is what you're voting for on Article 45. I move the town vote to accept a sidewalk easement and such related easements, interests, and rights of access as determined necessary by the Board of Selectmen from Sheridan Road Realty Company in and about a portion of the property located at or near 1 Candle Lane, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to execute all documents and take all actions necessary in connection therewith. This is a majority vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed. Article 45 passes. Article 46, Selectman Amperson.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to accept 3 parcels of land along Otis Street from Walmart Real Estate Business Trust, said parcels being more particularly described as parcels A, B, and C, on a plan entitled Plan of Land in the Town of Northborough by Control Point Associates, Inc., dated February 2nd, 2013, for the purpose of widening the public way.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Litchfield.
Thank you. These parcels are being deeded to the town by the Walmart Corporation in accordance with their approval of for the expansion of their store from the Zoning Board of Appeals, which was granted on February 28, 2011. The developer was required to construct a second driveway for truck access to provide a dedicated right turn lane for passenger vehicles entering the site from the north in order to improve safety. These parcels will be included as part of the Otis Street right-of-way going forward.
Thank you. Any questions, any discussions from the floor on Article 46? Hearing none, may I hear a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen, please?
The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support Article 46.
Okay, this is what you're voting on for Article 46. I move the town vote to accept 3 parcels of land along Otis Street from Walmart Real Estate Business Trust, and parcels being more particularly described as parcels A, B, and C on a plan entitled Plan of Land in the Town of Northborough by Control Point Associates, Inc., dated February 2nd, 2013, for the purpose of widening the public way. This is a majority vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed. Article 46 passes. Article 47, Consolidated Personnel Bylaw. Selectman Amperson.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town to vote to amend the Consolidated Personnel Bylaw as shown in the handout, copies of which were available in the town clerk's office continuously prior to the posting of the warrant until the time of town meeting, entitled Article 47, Consolidated Personnel Bylaw Amendments, 2014 Annual Town Meeting.
Motion's been made and seconded. Presentation by Assistant Town Administrator Kim Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is essentially a housekeeping matter to amend the town's classification and compensation plans for fiscal 2015. This article includes a general wage increase of 2% for all non-union municipal employees effective July 1st, 2014, which is consistent with the average increase for the town's collective bargaining units pursuant to the town's bylaw. In addition, this article includes the reclassification of the Inspector of Buildings zoning enforcement position based on increased responsibilities, and it also adds a new program coordinator position intended to assist with program development at the senior center.
Thank you. Are there any questions and debate? Hearing none, I'd like to hear from the Personnel Board.
Mr. Moderator, the Personnel Board voted unanimously to support this article.
Thank you. And may I hear from the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee, please?
The committee voted unanimously to support this article, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. This is what you're voting for Article 47. I move the town vote to amend the Consolidated Personnel Bylaw as shown in the handouts, copies of which were available in the town clerk's office continuously prior to the posting of the warrant until the time of town meeting, entitled Article 47, Consolidated Personnel Bylaw Amendments, 2014 Annual Town Meeting. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor, please raise your cards. And those opposed, Article 47 passes. Mr. Campbell, are you ready? Article 48, Community Preservation Fund Information Signs for Historic Commission.
Mr. Moderator, if you would, if it's your intent to finish town meeting tonight, all articles, I intend to abbreviate my presentations to try to get through all 10 articles and the 2 that follow. If it's likely that you'll adjourn in the middle, I wanted to consider starting over the next session tomorrow. Your choice. I work late a lot. Doesn't bother me.
Well, we need to put that out to the floor. If we're going to suspend the rules and go beyond the normal 11 o'clock hour, will any of us still be here, first and foremost? And secondly, I think that, you know, we're still going to have a reasonable load for tomorrow. And if Mr. Campbell would like to start bright and early, or relatively early tomorrow, we can go through that. That's a possibility as well. Does anyone feel strongly about adjourning the meeting now because it is the 11th hour? May I have a motion to adjourn until tomorrow?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Please come back tomorrow night. There's more excitement to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.